Chapter 21-24. Untitled. Ling Han pulled seventh brother forwards and replied, "Oh, I am here to seek justice." "Seek justice. My lord, dare I ask what offense our clan has committed against you?" Lu Huashan asked cautiously. Ling Han kicked seventh brother, and replied, "Not me but two kids." He related how seventh brother and his party had almost run over the children. Hearing Ling Han finish his tale, every member of the Lu clan bore strange expressions. Fuck, just because of such a minor matter, you actually charged personally to the Lu clan. Wasn't it just two mere mortals? Who would care about their life or death? Ling Han swept a glance over the masses, and stated calmly, "I care." Though the members of the Lu clan still thought nothing of it, they did not dare reveal their thoughts in their expressions. "Then dare I ask, my lord, what kind of compensation you wish to seek from us?" Lu Huashan asked. Whatever the case, Ling Han had still resolved the threat of the Kong clan for them, at least for now. That was the case, and Ling Han also had the ability to destroy the Lu clan single-handedly. Thus, the members of the Lu clan naturally dared not show any disrespect towards him at all. This was a demon king. Who knew what kind of terrifying damage would be caused by his thunderous rage? Since you cannot control your own subordinates, then does the Lu clan still have the need to exist? Ling Han asked calmly. You want to destroy our Lu clan?" Lu Huashan inhaled sharply. Ling Han shook his head. "I will give you a month's time to disband the Lu clan. Otherwise, I will disband it on your behalf." "My lord, those were just two little brats, and our Lu clan would have Ito pay such an exorbitant price for it. This is unjust." Lu Huashan called out loudly, filled with defiance. 1 month. Ling Han did not waste any more words, and merely found a house in the town to stay in. He had deliberately given a time limit of a month. Hi's purpose was not to destroy the Lu clan, but rather to force the Lu clan to continue seeking out the members of the Imperial Void sect. This was an opportunity. He wanted to find his way into the Imperial Void sect. The Imperial Void Celestial King was linked in countless ways with the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable, and it is extremely possible that he was the disciple of the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. To Ling Han, making his way into the Imperial Void sect is not his ultimate motive. What he really wanted to find out about was the Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable. When the Master of the Black Tower died, did it have any relation with the three great Heavenly Venerates? Ling Han's guess was yes. Otherwise, why would Small Tower be so incredibly wary about these three great Heavenly Venerates? Then what was the real truth? Why had the ancient realm been split in two? A Heavenly Venerate couldn't have possibly done something like that for no fathomable reason, right? The large black dog had once said that the three great Heavenly Venerates treated the storm of darkness passively. What kind of attitude did these three mighty figures actually maintain? There were a great many matters that he would only find out once he made actual contact. He would use the Lu clan as contact point, and enter into the Imperial Void sect first, and then further enter into the Sealed Emotion Palace. "Lord Clan Leader, what should we do?" The moment Ling Han left, the members of the Lu clan exploded. That guy must be a dividing soul tier, and have astonishing battle prowess to be able to forcibly break through the formation. Even if our strength was multiplied 100-fold over, it would still be useless. Lu Huashan pressed his hands down, and said in displeasure, "What are you panicking about? Don't we still have one last move to make? Xiaoshan, go and pay a personal visit to send the news to the Green Willow City." He looked towards an elder. This was a third Severance Grand Elder of Lu clan, and the second strongest elite aside from him. Lu Xiaoshan hummed and said, "But if I leave, what if the Kong clan comes to attack us again?" WTH, a third Severance Grand Elder drawn away. If the Kong clan came to attack again, the Lu clan would be in danger. It's fine. As long as that bringer of calamity is still here, the Kong clan would definitely not dare to be rash. Lu Huashan appeared to be brimming with confidence. "Clan leader, is that really trustworthy?" someone asked. Lu Huashan nodded. "With the ancestral records as proof, we are indeed the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King. However, it is rather hard to speak about. Our ancestor was birthed from an accident between the 7th-generation grandson of Imperial Void Celestial King with a courtesan." Everyone gave an "oh." No wonder Lu Huashan had previously been so unwilling to speak of the relationship between them and the Imperial Void Celestial King, so that was the case. Indeed, this was really very embarrassing. All right, I will immediately set out. Lu Xiaoshan nodded. He made a prompt decision, and hurried towards Green Willow City. With his cultivation level, if he exerted all his effort, he would be able to arrive in 11 or 12 days. This was also why Ling Han had given the time limit of a month. After Lu Xiaoshan arrived, he immediately used the summoning formation there to obtain contact with the Imperial Void Sect. Originally, with his status, there was no possible way that he would be able to gain contact. However, he clarified his identity at the first moment, and the other would rather believe it to be truth than not, and thus helped him to find a powerful figure of the sect. The message was passed through multiple levels, and verified repeatedly. In a mere 3 days, the identity of the Lu clan was confirmed. They were indeed the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King, but their bloodline was already extremely and boundlessly distant. However, the descendants of a Celestial King were still the descendants of a Celestial King. How could they be allowed to be slighted? Hee, there is actually such an arrogant person. I really would like to see him for myself. When they were in the midst of discussion whom they should send, a man dressed in green robes spoke. He looked extremely young, yet had an overbearing air, as if even celestial kings would have to grovel in front of him. Yulan Fenghua, the personal disciple of the Imperial Void Celestial King, and also his most beloved divided soul. At present, his cultivation level was Earth Soul, and was a monarch among monarchs. It is said that he has inherited some portion of the graceful bearing of the Imperial Void Celestial King when he was young. Holy Son Yulan, there is absolutely no need for you to go, is there? Someone hurriedly advised. Though Yulan Fenghua's cultivation level was not very high, because he was too favored by the Imperial Void Celestial King, even a first heaven or second heaven Celestial King would have to give him some face. He was too important. If anything happened to him, the Imperial Void Celestial King would definitely fly into a thunderous rage, and no one would be able to bear that kind of consequences. It's fine. He can only be a heaven soul at most, Yulan Fenghua stated carelessly. Though he was only an earth soul, he had defeated even heaven soul monarch tiers before. It could be said that any dividing soul tier would only be an ant in his eyes. Because he was not only the Imperial Void Celestial King's disciple, he had also obtained personal guidance from the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. That was a Heavenly Venerable tier. What kind of character was that? Reigning supreme over the heaven and earth, he naturally could make him so strong that even monarch tiers could only feel despair. He did not believe that Ling Han was capable of matching him. It was just a spontaneous impulse that gave him the idea of making this trip. The moment that Yulan Fenghua had decided, aside from the Imperial Void Celestial King, no other person could make him change his mind. All right, then Holy Son Yulan will set out. Yulan Fenghua set out. He had a flight device, which the Imperial Void Celestial King had personally strengthened with regulations of the Great Tao. Its speed of flight was astonishingly fast, and in a mere 3 days, he had arrived at the Green Willow City from a boundlessly far location. He contacted Lu Huashan, and they returned together to the Lu clan. When he got the news, Lu Huashan immediately appeared together with the important figures of the clan, to receive the arrival of Yulan Fenghua. Welcome, Lord Holy Son. The members of the Lord all paid their greetings respectfully. Though they were the descendants of the Imperial Void Celestial King, their bloodline was too distant. Furthermore, they were birthed by a courtesan, so they naturally had even less confidence. Yulan Fenghua was completely unconcerned. He had seen this kind of scene too many times, and it was absolutely impossible to make him feel any kind of feeling of superiority anymore. He nodded casually and said, "Where is that arrogant man? Let me lead the way," Lu Huashan hurriedly proclaimed. Led by Lu Huashan, the members of the Lu clan all followed, and charged grandly to where Ling Han was presently staying. He actually dared to threaten the Lu clan? Fuck, let's see if we won't kill you, be it starred. Chapter 21-25. Overlord of Monarch Tiers. Though the town was big, everyone was still severing mundane tier elites. Thus, in less than 7 or 8 minutes, everyone had arrived at the first level of the house Ling Han was staying in. This was a 3-story tall building, and Ling Han was staying on the third floor. "You insolent madman, scram out immediately!" The members of the Lu clan immediately shouted. By now, they were filled with confidence. "The limit of a month has not arrived yet, and you people have already settled your matters?" Ling Han's voice rang out from upstairs. "You're dreaming. Today is the day that you deliver up your head. Hurry and get down to pay your greetings to Lord Holy Sun." The members of the Lu clan all demanded at once. "Holy Sun." Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had actually drawn out a Holy Sun of the Imperial Void sect? It looked like the Lu clan was still quite important. He opened the window and swept a glance over the gathered masses. Immediately, he focused on Yulan Fenghua. Such a man that seemed to possess his own halo would be like a crane in a flock of chickens wherever he was, incredibly striking to the eye. Yulan Fenghua also looked towards Ling Han, his gaze slightly flickering, and revealing a hint of surprise. He could actually feel a coldness from Ling Han, causing him to feel a slight stab of pain, as if he had encountered a strong enemy. Was this possible? Who was he? Monarch of monarchs, the disciple of Imperial Void Celestial King, the grand disciple of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. With such a prestigious identity, who else could compare to him in this world? Could it be that the other was a top-grade Heaven Soul Monarch tier? That had to be the case. "Come down, kneel and cripple your limbs, and I will spare your life," he stated calmly. Even if he felt pressure, he was still filled with confidence in himself, and thought that if they were really going to battle, he would definitely still be the ultimate victor. To defeat an opponent stronger than him was something he was an expert in. It was also a tag that was attached to him, a dazzling halo of light. Ling Han chuckled and then spat out, "Idiot! Idiot!" Yulan Fenghua was slightly startled, and then a shock filled with absolute disbelief rose up in him. Was this really a monarch tier? To actually speak in such an unreserved manner, this was practically disgraceful. Involuntarily, he clenched his fists. The self-control that he had always taken pride in seemed to easily collapse in front of Ling Han. He took a few deep breaths, and only then did he suppress his fury. "The pride of our Imperial Void sect cannot be trampled on by anyone. Since you refuse to take the way out that I have already offered to you, I can only send you on your way to the underworld." "Where does your confidence come from?" Ling Han bit into a crisp apple, appearing incredibly casual. "What I enjoy the most is stepping on those so-called prodigies. You seem to have an itch, so are you asking to be beaten?" "You're seeking death," Yulan Fenghua exclaimed lightly. His figure rose into the air and charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han's right hand clenched into a fist and delivered a punch at Yulan Fenghua. Pang! The two men each launched a blow. Instantly, origin power clashed first, forming a contention of power. Boundless regulations surged, turning into indestructible blades. Pang, pang, pang. All objects in their surroundings were instantly rendered into scraps. Because Ling Han had moved in, the surrounding residents had long since moved out, but there were still a great many people that had come with Yulan Fenghua. Swept by these sharp blades, many were immediately killed. Lu Huashan couldn't help but shiver, his face twitching madly. They were done for, done for. Those that were qualified to come were the pillars of support of the clan, and now practically more than half of them had been eliminated with a single clash. To the Lu clan, this was a severe hit, and they might not be able to recover from this kind of damage even in several 100 million years. Why was this still the result when Yulan Fenghua had come? This time, Yulan Fenghua was really surprised. Ling Han was actually Yin Soul tier, a minor level lower than himself even. Impossible! His opponent's cultivation level was lower than his own, yet the other party could actually exude such intimidating pressure, and made him feel as if he was facing a powerful foe. In fact, he even managed to sustain a blow from him. How could there be such a freak? "I am Yulan Fenghua," he announced in a deep voice. He did not even spare a glance at the members of Lu clan, who had been implicated in the shockwave, and were looking at him. The Imperial Void Celestial King really had too many descendants, and facing such existences whose bloodline was so distant that it was practically negligible, and who had such lowly origins, there was naturally no need to be overly concerned about their life or death. Ling Han calmly stated, a hint of seriousness flashing through his gaze. The pressure that Yulan Fenghua gave him was not inferior to what he felt from Ji Wuming. However, Yulan Fenghua was an earth soul, a minor level higher than Ling Han. With such a comparison, it could be seen that Yulan Fenghua was inferior to Ji Wuming. True, Ji Wuming was a ninth heaven celestial king that had reincarnated and was recultivating. Aside from a person like Ling Han who was blessed by heaven, how could others compare? Ling Han? Ling Han? Yulan Fenghua murmured a few times. I will remember that. No need, no need. Ling Han hurriedly waved a hand. I do not have the habit of being remembered by men. Cheeky mouth. Yulan Fenghua's expression darkened. He raised his right hand and gripped the empty air, as if there was something solid in his hand. Then, he began to drag from his left hand to his right hand, and a transparent sword appeared out of thin air. If you can block 100 moves from me, I'll spare your life, he declared. Though Ling Han had managed to block a blow from Yulan Fenghua, the latter was still filled with an absolute confidence in victory and himself. However, he still did not dare to underestimate Ling Han in the slightest, and summoned his own pseudo-celestial tool. Otherwise, he did not have the confidence that he could kill Ling Han in 100 moves. Then I'll play with you. Ling Han felt a thrill. He, too, wanted to know what extent his present battle prowess had reached. Kill! Yulan Fenghua's figure pounced, and in a flash, it was 3 divided souls charging out together. They charged to assault Ling Han from 3 sides, while the original was brandishing the pseudo-celestial tool in a slash towards Ling Han. There were just 4 of them, yet possessed an imposing aura as if not even a magnificent army could compare. Any one of them could easily pierce a hole in the dome of heaven, and dictate the heaven and earth. Ling Han did not use his divided souls, but rather drew the divine demon sword, and charged towards Yulan Fenghua. Arrogance! Yulan Fenghua smirked coldly. The other man wanted to oppose him without using his divided souls. The 4 of him were one and the same, and launched a mad offensive towards Ling Han simultaneously. Pang! 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 The careless shock waves produced from their clashes could cause massive damage. Before even 10 moves had lapsed, the small town of the Lu clan had already been completely destroyed. Not only had the foundations completely vanished, even a deep layer of the land had been scraped away, turning into a large lake. Ling Han and Yulan Fenghua were battling intensely above this lake. Ling Han channeled various source powers, but not only was he unable to suppress Yulan Fenghua, he was beaten into continuous retreat, and had fallen into a disadvantage. Strong, he was really strong. He had no choice but to summon his 2 divided souls to join the battle, or he would really be no match for Yulan Fenghua. The 2 great young prodigies were all exerting their full efforts. Every blow was capable of rendering the sun dim and lightless, causing even the stars to lose their color. Yulan Fenghua's expression was slightly ugly. He actually only managed to battle Ling Han to a tie. To say nothing of the fact he still had a superior advantage of a minor level, even if both their cultivation levels were equal, this was still something he could not accept. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, he should be absolutely invincible. It's about close to 300 moves, right? Ling Han asked casually. Previously, Yulan Fenghua had made a promise of defeating Ling Han within 100 moves. Yulan Fenghua did not utter a word. He was now truly angered. Even if he could not kill Ling Han, he still wanted to defeat Ling Han. Otherwise, his pride would not allow it. Heavenly Pillar, he shouted lightly, and made a pulling movement. Suddenly, a transparent, crystal-like pillar descended from the heavens, pressing down on Ling Han. Ha! Ling Han shockingly discovered that his body could no longer move. Chapter 21-26. Arrangements. This was a spatial restraint. Before the Celestial King tier, the regulations of space were superior to the 5 elements, and most people cultivated the 5 elements. Thus, anyone who cultivated the regulations of space would be superior to others by nature. Yulan Fenghua showed a hint of arrogance. This was the secret technique unique to the Imperial Void Celestial King. Among the Imperial Void Celestial King's 9 disciples, he was the only one who had grasped this secret technique. Beneath the heavenly pillar, Ling Han's limbs would be restrained, as if he was suppressed by the pillar of heaven. Boom! He sent out a palm strike directly at Ling Han's chest. If this blow landed, Ling Han would definitely sustain serious injury. However, Yulan Fenghua had deliberately avoided his mind, which could be considered as having fulfilled his previous promise. As long as Ling Han could survive 100 moves from him, he would spare Ling Han's life. Ling Han smiled faintly. Wang, the space around him warped, as if countless mirrors had come to being. Ling Han's image could be seen everywhere. You can use regulations of space, and you think I can't? Yulan Fenghua immediately came to an abrupt stop. That was because he could not distinguish which was the real Ling Han at all. All of them exuded an aura that made it seem like they were the real one, but how could so many true selves exist, so they had to be false? Then where was the real one? Great spatial cut. He was only taken aback for a moment, and then immediately used another celestial technique. The pseudo-celestial tool in his hold glowed, and sent out a streak of light that was 30,000 meters long, slashing out at his surroundings. Instantly, the space was shattered. Those images of Ling Han also shattered into pieces. Finally, Ling Han's true self appeared. He was standing in the air 300 meters away, and his two divided souls stood beside him. Yulan Fenghua stood, sword in hand. You are indeed very strong, but definitely no match for me. Where does your confidence come from? Ling Han asked smilingly. He had not used Great Clash of Source Powers. He was sure that if he used this move, even if Yulan Fenghua did not die, he would definitely not dare to take a second attack from him. That is because I really am that strong, Yulan Fenghua declared proudly, pressing out his left hand at Ling Han. Chong multiple divine chains of regulations shot out, turning into a web that sealed off all paths of retreat for Ling Han. Ling Han also pressed out his left hand, the regulation of slaughter activating. Sword Qi danced wildly, slashing the divine chains of regulations that Yulan Fenghua had shot out into bits. He launched an offensive, and the heaven-destroying 9 swords was used, its vicious might soaring sky-high. Pang, 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 wang, wang, wang. The two great prodigies clashed, and one celestial technique after another was cast. The explosive tension became heavier and heavier, and the might of their secret techniques also became stronger and stronger. All prodigies were proud, especially for overlords of monarch tiers like them. If their cultivation levels were close, then they would definitely want to win, and Yulan Fenghua's pressure was clearly heavier because he had the advantage of a minor level over Ling Han. Even if Ling Han forced him to a tie, he could not accept it, either. Otherwise, how could he bring himself to face others in future? Unleashing a battle cry, his whole person became ethereal. One after another, spatial spikes shot out from his body. Each one was the overwhelming blow of the pinnacle of Heaven's Soul, and it was guaranteed that even a Heaven's Soul monarch tier would be incredibly troubled by this. Ling Han had no wish to easily expose the secret of the toughness of his physique. Thus, he also used regulations of space, and manifested thousands of himself. No matter how strong your attack was, so what? If it could not hit me, it was completely useless. The two prodigies were continuously and endlessly battling intensely like that. Sometimes, it would be Ling Han beating down on Yulan Fenghua, while at other times, it was Yulan Fenghua instead that was suppressing Ling Han. Offensive and defensive switched from one side to the other at a shocking speed, and neither of them could truly claim the upper hand. Ha 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 ha. Yulan Fenghua suddenly laughed loudly. He took the initiative to stop and said, "Your strength is close to mine, and it would be meaningless for us to continue fighting. Why don't we call a ceasefire now?" "Sure." Ling Han nodded. All that he had done was merely to make his way into the Imperial Void Sect, so he naturally wouldn't really battle Yulan Fenghua to the death. If he was really serious, he would have used the Great Clash of Source Powers. The destructive power of that was enough to destroy the heavens and earth, and was even capable of blasting a hole through the void. Come, Brother Han, let us have a nice chat." Yulan Fenghua pulled on Ling Han's hand, presenting an image of good friends and brothers. All the members of the Lu clan exchanged looks. They were done just like that. Hadn't he said that he would kill Ling Han? And now, the Lu clan was already razed to the ground, with many of their members dead. Whom were they going to seek justice from? But Yulan Fenghua was the holy son of the Imperial Void Sect, while they were only the descendants of a courtesan. How could they compare? Furthermore, the gap in power was practically the difference between heaven and earth, so they had best just keep quiet. Who knew? they might even anger Yulan Fenghua into eliminating them. Yulan Fenghua was smiling very brightly on the surface, but killing intent was already shifting quietly in his heart. He could do nothing against Ling Han, but he was also sure that Ling Han could not do anything to him. However, Ling Han was inferior to him by a minor level. Thus, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, he was definitely no match for Ling Han. Which also meant that the latter was even more freakishly genius than himself. He definitely could not allow this kind of prodigy to exist in his eyes, and he was determined to eliminate him. Thus, he had to appease Ling Han first, and then set up some arrangements to get rid of Ling Han. Someone that was even more freakish than himself could not be allowed to exist in this world, at least not someone without any kind of background like Ling Han. He had already left the Lu clan town with Ling Han, though it had already been razed to the ground. Then they found a restaurant, sat facing each other, and began to talk. Yulan Fenghua was trying to worm info out of Ling Han, and Ling Han was attempting the same thing. Yulan Fenghua wanted to know of Ling Han's origins. If this guy was connected to a ninth heaven celestial king or even heavenly venerable tier, then even he would not dare to act recklessly. And Ling Han wanted to know more about the Imperial Void sect, so there was naturally no simpler, more direct means than asking the Holy Son of the Imperial Void sect. Additionally, Ling Han also wanted to know which heavenly realm he was in. If he were to ask directly, others would probably laugh themselves to death. You didn't even know where you yourself were. After talking for a long time, the two of them finally gained some information that they each needed. Yulan Fenghua had confirmed that Ling Han did not come from any kind of powerful background, but was truly very talented and had extremely good luck, while Ling Han also found out some facts about the Imperial Void sect. At least, he found out which heavenly realm he was currently in. 10,000 Splendors Heaven, which lay adjacent to the Rock Heaven. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully, he had not been diverted too far away. Brother Ling, are you interested in paying a visit to the Imperial Void sect? Yulan Fenghua offered an invitation to Ling Han. With your natural talent, Brother Ling, my master may also appreciate you, and might even take you in as a disciple. Here it comes. Ling Han was not willing to believe that the other man would really be so kind. Instead, he only wished to deceive him into entering the Imperial Void sect. By then, with Yulan Fenghua's status, it would be extremely easy for him to kill him secretly with a trap. However, this fell in line with Ling Han's own plans. He wanted to enter into the Imperial Void sect, and finally enter into the sealed emotion palace with that as his stepping stone. However, it was not now. I still have some private matters to settle, so maybe a while later, Ling Han replied. He wanted to go to the Rock Palace first. That could no longer wait. When? Yulan Fenghua asked, unwilling to resign. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, we'll set the time at 100 years from now then. All right, then I will wait for Brother Ling's arrival at the Imperial Void sect. Yulan Fenghua was not the type to worry about his gains and losses. Immediately, he clapped his hands. To Celestials, 100 years' time would pass practically with a snap of the fingers. Ling Han nodded and said, I will take my leave. Please. Yulan Fenghua stood up to send him off. Ling Han had already achieved his goal for this trip, so he naturally would not loiter around much longer. His only purpose for deliberately taking this detour was the Imperial Void sect. You have to consider seriously, Small Tower spoke up suddenly. Chapter 21-27. Besieged. What do you mean? Ling Han asked. The Imperial Void Celestial King is no ordinary Ninth Heaven Celestial King. His strength is unfathomable, and is just a thread's breadth away from Heavenly Venerable Tier, Small Tower said solemnly. If he was given a few more epochs, he may really be able to break the great limits of heaven and earth, and successfully attain Heavenly Venerable Tier. If he gets curious about you, there is no way you would be able to keep any secrets. Ling Han nodded and replied, it's fine. It's just an idea in my head for now. It's not like I am so determined to go. However, could it be that there is no way that I could fool the eyes of a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, or even a Heavenly Venerate? If the one he was talking to was not Small Tower, it would be absolutely impossible for Ling Han to voice out such a question. To fool the eyes of a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, or even a Heavenly Venerate. Was he joking? However, Small Tower was a heavenly venerable tier tool, so perhaps there was indeed some way possible. Small Tower paused, and after a while, it finally said, "There is a secret technique in the Heavenly Saint Palace that can fool the heavens and earth, and coordinating with your power of the 5-element source powers, it should be possible for you to temporarily deceive a 9th heaven celestial king. However, if the Imperial Void Celestial King observes you carefully, don't even think of hiding anything. Don't you even think about Heavenly Venerable Tier. This has surpassed the regulations of heaven and earth, and has touched directly on essence." Ling Han nodded. Apparently, he really needed to make a trip to the Heavenly Saint Palace, and he could just see his son while he was at it. Who knew if this silly brat was still being imprisoned? He set out towards the rock heaven, his speed becoming faster and faster. Too many years had passed. He longed to see his parents and lovers again. Such thoughts became increasingly urgent and pressing. Now that he had grasped the powerful regulations of space, he used the void space and pushed his speed to the pinnacle. 2 months later, he entered the rock heaven. It could not be helped. Even if his present speed had reached the pinnacle, that was still only the pinnacle of the dividing soul tier. Any immortal palace tier would be able to easily crush him. It was only 2 months, and this was already very fast. After entering the rock heaven, he would occasionally see manifestations of chi forming multiple images of the rock in the air. However, he quickly saw arrows shoot from the ground and destroy these manifestations. At first, Ling Han thought this was only a random phenomenon, but after several times of the same thing happening, Ling Han finally realized that something was off. Xiao, another sharp arrow shot out, and shattered the chi of the rock. Ling Han immediately flew, descending down towards where the sharp arrow had shot out from. His figure descended, and saw that a middle-aged man was just presently withdrawing the giant bow he was holding. It was dark green in color, and even taller than the archer. "Brat, what are you looking at?" This middle-aged man tossed a glare at him, multiple great stars appearing in his pupils, and exuding a frightening aura. This was an immortal palace tier great elite. Ling Han clasped his fists together in greeting, and said, "This junior just happened to pass by, and coincidentally saw senior use your powerful technique." The arrow furiously shot through the skies, possessing boundless dominance. "I have thus deliberately come over, wishing to admire senior's graceful bearing." He could speak in a very caustic manner, causing others to stomp in fury, but at the same time, he could also speak in a way that made others feel very pleased and comfortable. This middle-aged man was very pleased by this compliment, and couldn't help but laugh loudly as he said, "That's right. I am renowned as the ultimate shot. 1 man and 1 arrow, and I can stop thousands of soldiers and horses in their tracks." He had been dispatched to stand guard here. It was actually quite boring, and he just happened to encounter someone who admired him. Thus, even if this was only a junior, he could still help him pass some time. "Is senior here to hunt immortal beasts?" Ling Han feigned ignorance. "Hee, you don't understand." The middle-aged man shook his head. "What I shot down earlier is called rock chi. According to legend, when the heaven and earth first split, the source beast, the rock, was born here. Thus, even if the rock has long since died, there would still be rock chi gushing out here. What is the use of it?" Ling Han still pretended to be very foolish and naive. The middle-aged man wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He glanced at Ling Han and then clapped his head, saying, "If you were a woman, I would have suspected your motives. However, the Rock Palace does not accept male disciples, so you must have no relation with the Rock Palace. There is no harm telling you. Our 4 Seas Palace is presently besieging the Rock Palace, and destroying these rock chi is my mission. That can sever the source of power for the Rock Palace, and can also sever their fortune as well." The Rock Palace was a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force. The fact that the middle-aged man could personally come and participate in the battle to obliterate the Rock Palace would become something that he could be proud of in the future, and he would be able to boast about it for the rest of his life. The Rock Palace's circumstances had already deteriorated to this extent. Their enemies were already here destroying rock chi without the slightest reservations, which was equivalent to leaping on their heads, but the Rock Palace could not do anything about it. The circumstances were really extremely horrible. Ling Han continued trying to worm information out from the middle-aged man, and the latter was, firstly, bored and secondly, did not suspect any ulterior motives, and thought that since Ling Han was a man, He had to be unrelated to the Rock Palace. As long as it was nothing that touched on the top secrets of the Rock Palace, he just talked to his heart's content. However, even if he wanted to leak out those secrets, it would be impossible. Immortal Palace tiers could be considered elite in a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force, but it was absolutely impossible for them to be involved in any top secret matters. After chatting for a long time, Ling Han wanted to leave, but the middle-aged man still persistently held on to him and talked about his past glories. His interest in talking was very high, and he talked for over 2 days. Only then was the middle-aged man finally willing to let Ling Han leave. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. He had actually encountered a chatterbox. The Rock Palace was naturally highly renowned in the Rock Heaven. Ling Han only had to make some casual inquiries, and easily found out the way to the Rock Palace. After about a month, he finally arrived at the foot of the mountain beneath the Rock Palace. On his way here, he had also seen a great many people who were shattering rock chi like the middle-aged man, showing that the Rock Palace's present situation was really one of great peril. Ling Han did not directly ascend the mountain, because he couldn't. There was presently an army that was unleashing a fierce offensive at the mountain entrance. He was initially stunned, but then relaxed because these troops were not powerful. The strongest among them was only at the ascending origin tier. Was an ascending origin tier not strong enough? In other forces, an ascending origin tier was indeed strong, and overwhelmingly strong at that. However, both the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace were 9th Heaven Celestial King tier forces. Celestial Kings numbered in the hundreds, an ascending origin tier really could not be considered all that powerful. Thus, this was only a clash of ascending origin tier against ascending origin tier, which meant that this was just a small-scale skirmish, and neither side had gotten really serious yet. True enough, this battle only lasted 3 days before ending, and both sides withdrew their own troops. Ling Han still could not pass, because the Four Seas Palace had sealed off the path of entry into the Rock Palace. Neither exit nor entry was possible. Previously, hearing the situation that Hunyo had described, the circumstances had not been as grim as this. Though the Four Seas Palace had penetrated into the Rock Heaven, it had not reached the extent that their swords were aimed directly at their main doors, but now it looked like they were close to eliminating the Rock Palace in a single move. What to do now? Ling Han thought for a moment, and came up with an idea. When the Four Seas Palace launched an offensive the next time, he would pretend to be a soldier on the side of the Four Seas Palace and sneak in. After he had rushed out of the area the Four Seas Palace had sealed off, he would then reveal his true identity, and then he would be able to enter into the Rock Palace. But in that way, if he wanted to leave, his path would be paved with great difficulty. He had already exposed his face. If he wanted to come back out again, would the Four Seas Palace easily let him pass? Who cared? He would just enter first, and then think about other things later. He waited patiently, and a mere 7 days later, the Four Seas Palace once again released a new wave of attacks. Charge! Ling Han called out loudly, mingling with the troops of the Four Seas Palace. In any case, he was a man, so there would definitely be no one who would suspect that he was on the side of the Rock Palace. Chapter 21-28. Looking for someone familiar. This was yet another small-scale skirmish. Ascending Origin tier elites would deliver a token assault, and Immortal Palace tier, Dividing Soul tier, and Severing Mundane tier Celestials would be tailing behind them. However, there was an extremely large number of troops, displaying the detailed power of a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier level force. Ling Han ran with the masses, calling out loudly a few times. Seeing the exaggerated expression on his face, others would think that he had some kind of deadly grudge against the Rock Palace. Brother, we are just cannon fodder, and this is above our pay grade. You don't have to be so serious, right? Someone by his side could not bear to watch. How were they supposed to live with that? Really? Ling Han chuckled. My mistake, my mistake. I overperformed. That's right. As the saying goes, the hunter will shoot the bird that sticks out. With you shouting and howling like this, if you were spotted by those damn women from the Rock Palace, they may lock onto you and hunt you down. Do you think that you are as strong as a Dividing Soul tier? This person was well aware of the pros and cons. Ling Han's purpose was actually just to attract the attention of those damn women. There were a great many people that had welcomed Hunyo back to the celestial realm. Only one of them needed to appear, and they would definitely be able to recognize him. Thus he only kept a low profile for a while, and then immediately became energetic again, yelling and shouting loudly. The troops of both sides rapidly closed in on each other, and then erupted in a great battle. Basically, this kind of battle would take place in the air. Usually, Ascending Origin tiers would battle fiercely at the highest point, and then Immortal Palace tiers would be at a slightly lower point, followed by Dividing Soul tiers, and finally it would be Severing Mundane tiers at the lowest point. Basically, that was at a point that was just a few dozen meters above the ground. The environment here was extremely sturdy. Thus, even if a maximum-scale battle royale broke out here, it would still be unable to crumble the mountains. Otherwise, this place would have long since been flattened. Die, you villain! A woman from the Rock Palace had locked on Ling Han, a pair of wings flapping behind her back as she rapidly charged over towards Ling Han. Celestials could fly, and after she possessed this pair of wings, her speed had also considerably soared. Practically in just the blink of an eye, she had appeared in front of Ling Han, her sword waving out in a sweeping slash. Those with the bloodline of the rock were naturally experts of regulations of space. Ling Han had no intention of exposing himself. Thus, he merely condensed his origin power on his fist, and parried this strike. Pung! The two of them were sent flying backwards. Ling Han had naturally faked it. His figure turned, and charged towards another place, searching for a familiar face with his memory. Even if 10 million years had passed, including the time spent in the Black Tower, everything that had happened in the small world all those years ago were still vivid in his mind. As long as it was someone that had appeared then, he would definitely be able to recognize her. Don't even think of fleeing. He had not foreseen that that woman was extremely stubborn. Wielding her sword, she pursued him. She probably had seen how Ling Han had pushed his performance too far, and developed animosity towards him. Ling Han laughed, and naturally would not stop. Instead, he ran even faster. Just at this moment, a powerful feeling of danger rose up in him suddenly. He hurriedly stopped, and retreated madly. As expected, a gaze had focused on him. That was an Immortal Palace tier elite, who had especially descended downwards to kill such weaklings like himself. Just now, if Ling Han had not retreated backwards decisively, he would have probably suffered a powerful attack from the former. Watch the sword. The woman from before pursued him, her sword stabbing straight at the back of Ling Han's head. Ling Han parried carelessly, pretending to be stuck in a stalemate with the other in battle. Then, he guided the fight to circle around the battlefield endlessly as he continued to look for someone familiar. Brother, let's work together to kill her. Coincidentally, the person that had reminded Ling Han not to overperform actually charged over. His hands wielding a golden saber, 7 seals of great Tao already glowing on it, and endlessly exuding an aura of violence. His face was filled with killing intent as he brandished his saber in a slash towards that woman. How underhanded, the woman rebuked. She could only turn around and tap out a finger. A rock flew out, greeting the incoming blow from the golden saber. Pung! The rock crashed into the golden saber, instantly causing a burning light to erupt. Seals of great Tao rose up one after another, and a fierce collision took place. Then they cancelled each other out. Her figure trembled, and then 4 divided souls came out, boosting her battle prowess to the pinnacle. Ling Han had no intention of lingering in battle, and guided the battle into movement. This scene looked a little strange. It was clear that he together with the other person had the advantage in numbers, and this person was not weaker than the woman, yet it was he that was fleeing in panic and the woman that was chasing him, while his companion pursued that woman. Brother, what are you running for? The person pursuing behind the woman could not help but call out. Fuck you, idiot! Ling Han cursed in his heart. This scene composed of the 3 of them was clearly off. It would be fine if you did not shout, but if you did, what were they supposed to do if they attracted the attention of others? It should be known that Ling Han had a halo of attracting trouble. Usually, even when he did not cause trouble, trouble would still come to him, so what more now? As expected, the eyes of an elite very quickly swept over, as sharp as a blade, causing Ling Han's skin to feel as if it was pricked. This was an Immortal Palace tier. Ling Han gritted his teeth. This Immortal Palace tier elite had clearly become suspicious. Even if he did not suspect that Ling Han was a spy, he would think that Ling Han had cowered and planned to become a deserter. How would a deserter end up on the battlefield? There was a 99% chance they would be killed in front of the troops as an example to the rest and to stabilize the military morale. Ling Han was exasperated, and could only turn around to battle the woman. That immortal palace tier elite himself was still battling furiously, but a sliver of divine sense was tagged onto Ling Han. Probably, he would kill Ling Han first at all costs if Ling Han continued to be passive in battle. Immediately, the woman from the Rock Palace fell into a disadvantage, her circumstances precarious. Haha, killing a dividing soul tier would mean 10 merit points, that companion of Ling Han declared, slightly excited. Clearly, while these 10 merit points were not a high reward, they seemed to be quite valuable. And that woman just hated Ling Han to death, so the focus of her assault concentrated on Ling Han, seeming like she was going to drag Ling Han down with her even if it meant her own death. Ling Han couldn't help but feel speechless. He had not unleashed even 10,000th of his own strength. Even if he did not fight back at all, his physique was nothing that the woman could penetrate anyways, so why go to all the trouble? He could not say these words directly, so he could only listlessly parry her blows. As long as that immortal palace tier no longer paid any attention to him, he would continue his search. But the circumstances of that woman from the Rock Palace were becoming more and more dangerous. She had already been struck a considerable number of times by the golden saber, her body covered with wounds, and her aura had also begun to become unstable. Brother, I won't be reserved then. Ling Han's companion's eyes shone with vicious light, his saber slashing out at that woman's neck. He had the confidence that her head would be severed with this one slash, and when the power of regulation infiltrated her body, this enemy would instantly die. He was the one who had delivered the finishing blow, so the credit would naturally go to him. That woman could no longer dodge. She was harsh on herself as well. Instead of dodging, wielder and sword moved as one, increasing her speed as she stabbed towards Ling Han. What kind of brain did she have? Ling Han shook his head, stretching out his right hand, and picking her up by the back of her neck. Then, with a clap of his left hand, pung, the golden saber that was delivering a slash from behind was sent flying. Be brother? The person from Four Seas Palace looked at Ling Han in shock, his mouth twitching slightly. How could this guy be so strong? But why had he been running all the time previously? It was clear that he could have easily settled the battle just by turning around, right? And he had tried to snatch his credit, so would he then hold a grudge against him? Who exactly was he? Chapter 21-29. Intervention of a powerful figure. Ling Han broke into a smile. Sorry. He waved his hand again, and pung, that person from Four Seas Palace was sent flying with a strike, shooting through the air like a kite that had its line cut, and drawing out an elegant arc before finally dropping. He had not been too heavy-handed. Thus, that person soon scrambled back to his feet, his expression completely gobsmacked. You depraved villain, what are you trying to do? The woman that he had grabbed exclaimed loudly. This man had already injured his companion just to grab hold of her. Then, what kind of beastly acts did he plan to do to her? Don't worry. With your looks, you are very safe. I won't do anything to you, Ling Han said carelessly, and then broke out into a mad run. That immortal palace tier elite had been keeping an eye on him all this while, and now that he had suddenly turned traitor, he naturally would fly into a thunderous rage and make a move. As expected, that elite was just about to throw off his own opponent, and make a move on Ling Han. But the Rock Palace elite's strength was extraordinary as well, keeping him entangled tightly in battle, leaving him no means of escape. Humph! The elite smirked coldly. Did he think that he could not do anything like this? He got a hand free, and tapped out a finger towards Ling Han. Ultimate celestial tap, he stated softly. Xiao, a streak of light shot rapidly towards Ling Han. This was a celestial technique that had been delivered from an immortal palace tier. It was definitely capable of insta-killing any dividing soul tier. Naturally, the Rock Palace elite that was fighting him could not possibly rescue an enemy. In any case, it was just a case of internal strife on the enemy side, so what did it have to do with her? She only sped up her attack, wanting to kill this powerful foe. Wang, a streak of light approached. This was the attack of an immortal palace tier. Even if it was not a full-powered blow, it was definitely not anything that a dividing soul tier could withstand. This light was like a fierce wave of obliteration. Fuck! Ling Han raised his hand and tossed the rock palace woman in his hands away, taking this attack on alone. Boom! A terrifying celestial light surged past. To a dividing soul tear, this was definitely fatal, and instantly submerged Ling Han within its light. The rock palace woman couldn't help but be dumbfounded with shock. In this kind of a situation, Ling Han had still thrown her away, and would rather die alone. What kind of true affection was this? Could it be that this was true love? She had not even finished the thought when the celestial light dispersed. Ling Han was standing there, completely unscathed, and merely a trace of blood was left at the corner of his lips. He didn't die. Involuntarily, she was shocked. That was the blow of an immortal palace tear, but Ling Han actually just bled a little from the corners of his mouth. What kind of frightening defense was this? Ling Han rubbed the corners of his lips. Just now, he had taken the initiative to channel the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, further improving the strength of his physique greatly. Even an immortal palace tear could not possibly kill him with a single blow. However, immortal palace tear was still immortal palace tear, after all. Ling Han was still in great pain all over his body, his organs practically close to exploding and shooting out from his body. As he saw it, this was very natural. In the first place, his physique was capable of ignoring any Heaven Soul level attack, so if he further channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he would be able to temporarily further improve his defenses greatly. Thus, wasn't it very normal that he would be able to block the attack of an immortal palace tear? However, anyone who witnessed this scene all showed expressions of astonishment, involuntarily stopping their movements. The impact of this scene was really too great. Why has the fighting stopped? Someone was still brandishing his weapon madly, but no one attacked him even after a long while, causing him to feel completely baffled. Even Immortal Palace Tier and Ascending Origin Tier elites had noticed, especially Ascending Origin Tier elites. Their divine sense was too sensitive. All this while, this battlefield was grasped in the palms of their hands. If their side lost, they would withdraw their troops as soon as possible to prevent overly excessive losses. Interesting, an Ascending Origin Tier spoke up, and then stretched out a hand suddenly, grabbing out at Ling Han. This kind of elite was really frightening. His hand had just moved, and it had already appeared in front of Ling Han out of nowhere, grabbing downwards at him. Humph! There was no need for Ling Han to dodge. Yet another large hand struck out, and attacked the first giant hand. Boom! A third giant hand attacked, and then it was a fourth, then a fifth. It was like Ling Han had suddenly become an ultimate treasure. Everyone wanted to capture him. Indeed, the fact that a dividing soul tier managed to block the blow of an immortal palace tier was too astonishing. Anyone would feel curious. Ling Han! An incredibly crisp voice rang out, and a figure suddenly shot out from the mountains. It was Hunyao. Little mistress, behave yourself. A large hand stretched out, and grabbed hold of Hunyao, forcibly pulling her back. However, very quickly afterwards, this large hand extended once more, and appeared directly in front of Ling Han, completely ignoring all laws of space. Long Yuexi, aren't you dead yet? A soft exclamation sounded, and another large hand appeared, arriving in a sweep. Compared to the first giant hand that was wrinkled all over, the second giant hand was much better looking, smooth as jade and shining with a soft luster. While it looked delicate, it had a kind of nobility and grace in its delicate appearance. Pa! The two giant hands crashed together, and an intense collision immediately erupted in the regulations of the Great Tao. Endless celestial light filled the heavens, and even those stars in the skies had completely lost their color in this brilliance. Pa 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 pa! Everyone knelt down. Aside from Ling Han, no one could be the exception. This was a suppression on the level of essence. It was like they were facing the heaven and earth, and did not have the slightest sliver of ability to resist. A celestial king had moved. A massive power rippled out, and Ling Han was instantly tossed flying. The danger of death enshrouded him. He had a feeling that it was useless even if he could use rising from the ashes. This wild storm of energy would extinguish the flames of his revival in the next instant, and strike him completely into death and the underworld. Because this was the move of a celestial king, an existence that was above all others. He hurriedly used the mystical power of time of the Black Tower, boosting himself so that his own time could be sped up by 10,000 times, winning him the time to save himself. But even so, the wild storm of energy that was madly rushing towards him was still overwhelmingly fast. He hurriedly used the power of the 5-element source powers, forming a defensive shield in front of him. However, this was really only capable of mounting slight resistance. The protective wall immediately crumbled. In front of this storm of energy, it was not capable of even lasting a single blow. However, this had also finally garnered a sliver of time for him. Ling Han had completely finished the thought, and Xiao, his entire person immediately disappeared without a trace. He had entered the Black Tower. Boom, in the outside world, wild waves of energy surged madly, spilling out in a completely unbridled manner. Even lower-level celestial kings would be terrified at this. No, no, no. Even if a 9th heaven celestial king was here, he would still frown slightly. That was because both sides were too strong, both being overlord existences even among 9th heaven celestial kings. The Imperial Empress of Four Seas Palace, Xueqi. The Grand Elder of the Rock Palace, Yuexi. After the attack, Xueqi had already appeared. She had a tall, slender build, and wore white imperial robes. Her glossy hair was piled on the top of her head, appearing poised and noble. And she was also a rare beauty. Compared to the Empress and Hunyeo, she was only slightly inferior in beauty, but added with the domineering air she possessed as a 9th heaven celestial king, she definitely was in no way inferior to the two women. Yuexi, come out here to meet your death, she demanded coldly. Yuexi paid her no regard at all, and merely calmly stated, retreat. Coward. Xueqi humphed. The other party had already avoided battle for a good many years, and Xueqi had already gotten used to it as well. It could not be helped. The other woman had sustained a Dao injury, and being able to live for so many years was already a very good fortune. If Yuexi went all out in battle, it was highly possible that the battle would be her last. That's not right. She was just about to wave her hand to signal for her troops to retreat as well when her eyes suddenly shone brightly, and swept a glance at the spot Ling Han had vanished. Yuexi, you almost had me fooled. Previously, though you have also avoided battle and hidden, you would not retreat as easily as this without a verbal battle at least. What are you trying to hide? Chapter 2130. Love Triangle. Xueqi's eyes swept over the spot. There was nothing in this world that could be hidden in front of her. A 9th heaven celestial king, from a certain aspect, was the manifestation of the regulations of heaven and earth, and could see through the essence of the heaven and earth. Her eyes focused on a single point, the expression on her face suddenly becoming excited. In fact, even her hands were trembling. Right at this moment, a large hand suddenly stretched out, directly scooped up that area, and then rapidly retreated into the depths of the mountains. If Xueqi had not been so excited that her mind had suddenly gone blank, there would have been absolutely no possibility that this large hand could have succeeded so easily. But now, it had caught her completely off guard. Yuexi. Xueqi flew into a thunderous rage abruptly, all her black locks raised skywards. Boom, 9 seals appeared on her body, each seal exuding a might that domineered the world. She was extraordinarily furious, as if she had become a demon. Her figure suddenly shot out as she set off in pursuit of the large hand. Pang! However, she had only pursued it for over 1,000 miles when a shield of light blocked her from advancing further. Even if she was a 9th heaven celestial king, so what? She had still stumbled back from the impact of her crash. He is Yuanshang's heir. Xueqi roared in fury. Yuexi, give him back to me. Give back your head. The old woman's, Yuexi's, aged voice rang out. Xueqi, you have already lost in the past, so what is the point of you so earnestly struggling now? Now both Yun and Yuanshang have long since died, so what else can you not let go of? Without destroying the rock palace, I will not be able to let it go. Xueqi declared harshly. As long as you and the brand of that B*TCH are still alive, I will definitely not give up. Attention to all members of the rock palace. She suddenly calmed down, her expression frighteningly cold. Whoever unlocks the formation for me, and allows me entry, I can appoint her as the Vice-Imperial Empress of the Four Seas Palace. Additionally, I only want the lives of 2 people. One is Yuexi, and the second is Tianyun. As long as the others do not resist, I can leave you alone. In fact, it is also possible for you to join the Four Seas Palace." After these words were out, a wave of commotion swept through both the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace. Previously, Shang Jiwei had clearly shown that she wanted to slaughter every single member of the Rock Palace. Surrender? She did not accept it. As long as they bore the name of the Rock Palace, she would kill all of them. Yet now, a complete reversal of her attitude had actually taken place. She only wanted the lives of Long Yuexi and Hunyou. This was practically... She had gone mad. But when a ninth heaven celestial king made a promise in public, it was like the heavens were speaking. They would live up to their word, or they would be abandoned by the Tao of heaven and earth, their battle prowess dropping greatly. Which also meant that this promise from Shang Jiwei was absolutely true. Why? The only thing that had changed was that she had suddenly discovered Ling Han's identity. He was the heir of some guy called Yuan Shang. What relationship did she have with this Yuan Shang? At this moment, the people of both palaces were both stunned and curious. This was the gossip of of 3 ninth heaven celestial kings. In your dreams, Long Yuexi declared coldly. Don't forget. This great protective formation has been personally laid down by Yuan Shang. Even after millions and millions of epochs, it would still exist for eternity, protecting our rock palace. Hee hee. Shang Jiwei did not answer, and merely responded with a cold smirk. She had completely gotten her emotions back under control. With a flick of her sleeves, she turned and left. In the rock heaven, Long Yuexi's aged face showed a solemn expression. Previously, Shang Jiwei had been extremely patient, wanting to slowly dry up the source of power of the rock heaven, and sever the rock palace's foundations. Then, even if they had a supreme protective formation sheltering, the rock palace would still become a pool of stagnant water, deteriorating from the inside out. But now that she had found out who Ling Han was, her patience had also instantly disappeared completely. Sigh, why had Ling Han come now with such a coincidental timing? With a flash, Ling Han exited the Black Tower. Ling Han. Hunyou pounced over, and hung on Ling Han like a koala. Ling Han patted the little girl's head, and said, "Where are the others? Are they all right?" Stupid Ling Han. You only care about other people. You don't care about Niu. Hunyou complained, biting Ling Han's neck. The others are perfectly fine, Long Yuexi continued, and then shook her head. Sigh, what an ill-fated relationship. Senior, exactly what is behind all this? Ling Han asked. Though he was inside the Black Tower, he had still heard the exchange between Shang Jiwei and Long Yuexi. It seemed that the feud between the Four Seas Palace and Rock Palace was not because of contesting over territory, but had rather originated from a romantic conflict. Long Yuexi sighed a few times again, and then said, "All right then. Since you managed to enter the Rock Palace all by yourself, which has proven your strength, as well as proven your good fortune, I will tell you. In the past, Shang Jiwei, Tianyun, and Yuan Shang had both fought alongside each other, grown together, and were very close with one another. Tianyun is the last imperial empress of the Rock Heaven, and she is also Yun. It's Hunyou. Hunyou interrupted her in irritation. She had never accepted the name of Yun. Long Yuexi smiled, and then said, Hunyou's body contains the martial brand that was left behind by Tianyun. She will be able to inherit Tianyun's martial foundations in the future. Perhaps she may even be able to exceed Tianyun's limits, and step onto a completely new height. Heavenly Venerable Tier. Ling Han continued. Long Yuexi nodded. Yuan Shang is the master that you have never met, but you have cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and thus you are his true disciple. Yuan Shang is supremely talented, and was the strongest prodigy of that era. Both Shang Jiwei and Tianyun fell in love with Yuan Shang, and Yuan Shang ultimately chose Tianyun, causing Shang Jiwei to feel resentment. Not only did she become enemies with Tianyun, she has also attacked Tianyun repeatedly. However, Yuan Shang ultimately successfully became a heavenly venerate, and no matter what Shang Jiwei tried, it would only be wasted effort. For the sake of their previous relations, Yuan Shang didn't do anything to Shang Jiwei, either. However, following Yuan Shang's death, Shang Jiwei also became very extremist, and thought that it was Tianyun who had caused Yuanshang's death. She suddenly delivered a fatal strike when Tianyun had sustained injuries in the resistance against the storm of darkness and returned, ultimately leading to Tianyun's death. She also wanted to destroy the Rock Palace, but thankfully, with the powerful formation laid down by Yuanshang, she was not able to take one step over the boundaries. I too have sustained fatal Dao injuries in the resistance against the force of darkness, but for the sake of the juniors of this palace, I can only struggle and keep holding on. When Hunyo matures, I will then be able to leave with an easy heart. As it turned out, it was a love triangle. Love had turned to hatred, and caused very good sisters to turn hostile against one another and become enemies. It was a little cliché. A great and noble ninth heaven celestial king had actually died because of this. It was a little wasted. Senior, how did Senior Yuansheng die? Ling Han asked. That was a heavenly venerate, already superior over heavenly Dao itself, so why had he still died? I am not very sure about that myself, but it involves 3 supreme existences. Their names cannot be spoken of. Long Yuexi said solemnly. Even if she was a ninth heaven celestial king, she still showed an expression of reverence and fear. Heavenly venerate. Could it be that it was the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable and the other great supreme elites that had joined forces to kill the karmic life Heavenly Venerable? But why? There was clearly an invasion of the storm of darkness, so they should have been united instead. If it was claimed that the 3 great heavenly venerates had turned traitor, that would be even more impossible. Now, it was just the 3 of them that were heavenly venerates. Wasn't opening the 2 realm passageway, and allowing the people of the foreign realm to march straight and unchallenged an incredibly simple matter? Who could stop them? Ling Han realized that though he knew more of the truth, it was practically of little help in solving the mystery. Chapter 2131. Breaking Through to Earth Soul. No wonder Shang Wei had suddenly gone mad. It was because she had discovered the heir of her old love. More importantly, this heir of her old love was actually running towards the Rock Palace. This naturally made her want even more to raze the Rock Palace to the ground. What gave them the right? She was no match for Tianyun, and now, even in the next generation, she could not win over Tianyun's reincarnation. Go and rest first. Long Yuexi waved a hand, a sliver of weariness seeping from her gaze. She had already struggled wearily for countless years, and this time, Shang Wei had changed her mind. It was highly possible that it would really shake the Rock Palace's foundations. In the past, they could only gather together, and endure the tribulations together. That was because all of them would share the same fate of death if the Rock Palace were to be conquered. But now, this compromise from Shang Wei immediately caused a great many people to lose the motivation to fight hard. If Long Yuexi was in a good condition, or Hunyo matured and reached 7th heaven or 8th heaven celestial king tier, then everyone would still have the confidence to hold on. However, Long Yuexi was already at the end of her line, and Hunyo was still who knew how many years away from the celestial king tier. How were they supposed to hold on during such days when there were practically no future prospects that could be seen? Moreover, Shang Wei had even promised that whoever unlocked the great formation of the Rock Palace would be appointed as the Vice-Imperial Empress of the Four Seas Palace. This naturally was a massive temptation. There was pressure as well as temptation. It was hard to guarantee that there wouldn't be any traitors. Thus, Long Yuexi had to keep a closer watch. Otherwise, if they lost the protection of the heavenly venerable tier great formation, Shang Wei would be able to penetrate straight into their heart. With her present battered body, Long Yuexi was definitely no match for Shang Wei. Ling Han, come play. Hunyo was simple-minded. Even if the mountain entrance was under siege, she was still casual and careless, completely unconcerned about it. Ling Han pulled her hand and asked, "Where are my parents?" "Oh, they are in a small town 10,000 miles away from here," Hunyo answered casually. Are they all right?" Ling Han was slightly nervous. After all, 10,000 years had already passed. If his parents had not raised their cultivation level, they would have long since died of old age. "They're fine," Hunyo replied with a smile. "They are both in the Genesis tier already." She blinked at Ling Han. Immediately, Ling Han understood. This little girl had given a lot of special attention to his parents. Otherwise, with the aptitude of his parents, It should not have been possible for them to advance to the Genesis tier, especially in as short a period of time as 10,000 years. He gave Hunyao a thumbs up as a symbol of encouragement. Hunyao was immediately pleased with herself, gladly accepting Ling Han's praise. What about Luan Xing and the others? Ling Han asked further. Hunyao immediately blinked her eyes, looking shifty. Ling Han sighed and asked, "What have you done again?" Hee hee. Hunyao laughed guiltily. As expected, Hunyao was still a jealous and petty lover. The moment Lu Herong had brought them back to the Rock Heaven, she had imprisoned the Empress, Bewitching Maiden Ro, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Thus, she was naturally guilty now that Ling Han was asking about them. "You mischievous little girl." Ling Han was speechless. Reluctantly, she released the Empress and the others. Hunyao almost came to blows with the Empress. Thankfully, Ling Han was there to play mediator, and taught Hunyao a good lesson. Only then was the dispute finally concluded. Ling Han looked at the Empress and Hunyao. This made him think of the love triangle between Yuan Shang, Tian Yun, and Shang Jiwei. If he did not deal with matters appropriately, perhaps the circumstances in the future would also evolve to that situation. He wanted to see his parents, but because they were under siege from the troops of the Four Seas Palace, no one could enter or exit, so how was he supposed to leave? Fortunately, the Rock Heaven was an ancient great sect, and was incredibly wealthy. There was a severing mundane tier mystery realm in the mountains of the Rock Heaven, and there was also a Yang Soul Ocean, Yin Soul Valley, Earth Soul Mountain, and Heaven Soul Pool. You wanted to break through to the Immortal Palace tier? There was also an Immortal Palace tier mystery realm here, so it was absolutely no problem. Ascending to Celestial King tier was the only exception. In that case you could only walk the celestial path. Since they could not leave for the moment, Ling Han thus decided to first break through to Earth Soul. He had already attained the conditions for breaking through. However, the Rock Palace did not have the custom of accepting male disciples. In fact, they did not even welcome males to stay temporarily here, but Ling Han could not leave. Thus, whenever he walked out, he would be the target of peculiar looks from the disciples of the Rock Palace. Hunyao, the Empress, and Bewitching Maiden Ro had all broken through before him. Not only had they broken through to Earth Soul, they had even already crossed over to the threshold of Heaven Soul. Ling Han then gave the Heavenly Sun Black Gold and Purple Spirit Flames to the two women, allowing them to pick first, and then collect it for their own. Whether they could or not would be up to the two women's own good fortune. The Empress chose the Heavenly Sun Black Gold, while Hunyao chose the Purple Spirit Flames. They entered into the Black Tower, and communicated with these two source powers of heaven and earth. With the time acceleration effects of 1,000-fold, they could take it slow and easy. Meanwhile, Ling Han headed towards the Earth Soul Mountain. At first, the Earth Soul Mountain did not belong to the Rock Palace, but the Source Beast Rock used its mighty strength to move the whole mountain here. From then onwards, the disciples of the Rock Palace would be able to advance to Earth Soul without taking a step outside. The real Earth Soul Mountain pierced straight into the clouds, hundreds of thousands of meters tall, but the rock was an expert of regulations of space. With it using a mighty technique to make some adjustments, the Earth Soul Mountain had been perfectly assimilated into the mountains when looking from the outside. Only when one set foot on it would one realize that this mountain was far higher than it looked. Ling Han arrived at the foot of the mountain. He raised his head and glanced upwards, and then began his ascent. All 4 levels of the dividing soul tier would need a specific item to become the container for a divided soul. However, a freak like Ling Han could use the source powers of heaven and earth to condense his 5th divided soul and so on. In that case, there was no need for so much trouble. There was no container or mystery realm like that in this world, either. The container for the Earth Soul tier, Truffle Crystal, was only produced on Earth Soul Mountain, and once it left the mountain, it would disappear. This was a restriction of heaven and earth, and no one could keep it in abundance. Of course, there were good and bad truffle crystals. This was mainly reflected in their height. The higher the altitude, the higher the quality of a discovered truffle crystal would be. Thus, Ling Han did not stop at all as he climbed towards the summit. This mountain repelled all cultivators above Yin Soul, and those below Celestial King tier could not enter. If a Celestial King were to forcibly barge in, this mystery realm would be burst and destroyed, being completely unable to sustain the great might of a Celestial King. Thus, even if you asked for someone else's help in the matter of retrieving truffle crystals, they could only be Yin's souls as well. Ling Han climbed the mountain as if he was walking on flat ground. Every 30,000 meters or so, he would encounter a barrier. It was formed by the mystical power of heaven and earth and manifested in human form. It guarded the passage, and he could only continue his advance after defeating it. The Source Beast Rock had not just simply moved this mystery realm here, but had used supreme methods to make slight adjustments so that the difficulty level of each stage had been considerably weakened. Yet Ling Han was unconcerned. With a single punch from him, he instantly resolved all his battles. He had already been capable of matching a Heaven Soul Long when he had been a Yang Soul. When the great clash of source powers exploded, it could even pose a threat to Heaven Soul Monarch tiers. This kind of battle prowess was naturally incredibly terrifying. Hence, could a Yin Soul level barrier be capable of becoming a dilemma for him? At the last 30,000-meter barrier, the human-shaped monster that was on guard had finally attained the standard of an Earth Soul Monarch tier, but Ling Han still managed to defeat it easily. He arrived at the summit. There were truffle crystals that were the size of a human head here, and it was also the best quality. Ling Han took one, and with a thought, the fiery flame lightning strike would immediately surged out of his dantian, entering into the truffle crystal. From the outside, there was a sapling spreading out its slender branches inside the translucent crystal, and there were vague flickers of flames and lightning. Chapter 2132. Formation Breaks. Ling Han began breaking through to Earth Soul. Over the last 10,000 years, he had been focused on studying the 5 element source powers, and under the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, that time had been further extended to 10 million years. In this process, he naturally gained a very deep, profound understanding of the essence of the Tao of heaven and earth. Those were source powers of heaven and earth. It was very rare for even celestial kings to gain even one, so they were naturally wondrous. The cultivation level barrier was very soon broken through. This was only a minor level. For a prodigy like Ling Han, it was naturally unable to cause any kind of difficulty. Long tribulation clouds began gathering densely in the skies, and the heavenly tribulation came as promised. At first, Ling Han wanted to use the heavenly tribulation to break free of the siege by the Four Seas Palace so he could go and visit his parents, Helian Xuanxue, and the others. With the boost of heavenly tribulation, who would dare stop him? But upon further thought, he dismissed this idea. The heavenly tribulation would only last half a day. They only had to follow him, and make their move after the heavenly tribulation dispersed. By then what could he do? Under tempering from the heavenly tribulation, Ling Han's physique gained a certain amount of improvement. However, there was not much use now with just the heavenly tribulation alone. Ling Han would have to further exploit the profound secrets of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. He endured this heavenly tribulation very easily. Half a day later, he packed up and returned. However, a storm was brewing inside the Rock Palace, and the core of the problem was him. The Rock Palace did not accept make disciples, nor did they entertain male guests. Having Ling Han here was clearly unjustified. Thus, a seventh heaven elder raised a suggestion, discussing the matter of expelling Ling Han from the Rock Palace. What? When Ling Han found out, he appeared incredibly stunned. Things had already come so far, and some old women were actually still in the mood to discuss this problem. Had their brains been kicked by a donkey? However, his cultivation level was low, and he had no status, so no one would be concerned about his opinion. Not many people knew that Ling Han was actually the heir of a heavenly venerate, just like not many people knew that Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable was actually the bestowed title of a heavenly venerate, and that was the same for Yuan Shang. Otherwise, the heir of a heavenly venerate was still very scary, though the karmic life heavenly venerable had long since passed away. In the end, it was Long Yuexi who had stepped out, and said that extreme times called for extreme measures, suppressing all disagreements. As Ling Han saw it, this was definitely not a disturbance that was only directed at him. A group of celestial kings were discussing the going or staying of a dividing soul tier behind closed doors. You got to be kidding. Even if they were presently trapped inside the Rock Palace, they were not as bored as that. There were traitors within the Rock Palace. Ling Han had long since guessed this when they had been ambushed on the sea, and now with such an event happening, he definitely did not believe that it was a mere accident or coincidence. However, Ling Han could not do much. Long Yuexi should have long since deduced that there was a traitor in the palace. If she had not done anything to stay on guard, she would not have deserved to be a ninth heaven celestial king. Ling Han also came to know that there was no eighth heaven celestial king in the rock heaven. Thus, beneath Long Yuexi, there were two seventh heaven celestial kings that had the highest authority. Long Yuexi could die at any moment. These two seventh heaven celestial kings were responsible for the duty of assisting, guiding, and protecting Hunyao. They were also figures that possessed considerable power within the rock palace. These two celestial kings were Elder Fuyun and Elder Sanhe. Elder Fuyun was the more radical of the two, and had a very strong thirst for power, while Elder Sanhe was completely focused on cultivation, and belonged to the type that was more unconcerned. This time, it was Elder Fuyun that had brought up the matter of Ling Han's expulsion from the rock palace. As a great seventh heaven celestial king, how could she bring herself to do it? There was something off with this old woman. Ling Han immediately concluded so internally, but the other party had high status and great power, so how could she be displaced merely with a few words from him? Of course, Hunyao would definitely listen to him, but would the other people listen to Hunyao? Hong long long. He felt a resounding boom sound in his ears, as if the heaven and earth had crumbled. What's going on? How dare you? Long Yuexi's voice rang out, filled with fury. Ha ha ha, Fuyun Celestial King, well done. Shang Jiwei's voice sounded as well. From today onwards, you will be the Vice-Imperial Empress of our Four Seas Palace. Instantly, Ling Han's heart jolted. He had just been thinking that there was something off with this old woman, but he had not thought that something would happen so fast. The Great Mountain Protective Formation had been opened. Multiple battleships were seen appearing in the skies, casting dark shadows, just like casting a shadow on the hearts of the members of the Rock Palace. Why has the Great Mountain Protective Formation been unlocked? Could it be that it was Elder Fuyun? Nonsense, didn't you hear Shang Jiwei's words? I say, the Four Seas Palace only wants Yun and the Grand Elder, so why should we put our lives on the line? Why don't we just surrender to the Four Seas Palace? That's right, even if we don't side with the Four Seas Palace, we can completely leave without any reservations. Why should we cling to a rock that is destined to sink like the Rock Palace and die alongside it? Everyone was conversing spiritedly. Some were incredibly stunned, while there were others that were advising people to surrender. Ling Han heard all this, and finally understood that the meeting previously was only a pretense. Its purpose was to allow those that wished to surrender to have an exchange of words, to achieve some kind of agreement. And now, as Fuyun Celestial King had unlocked the Great Mountain Protective Formation, the others became lobbyists, speeding up the destruction of the Rock Palace. Long Yuexi, today will be the day of your death. Shang Jiwei's figure appeared, standing proudly in the air, but her exquisitely beautiful figure was exuding an air of supreme dominance, like an ultimate empress. It is only a battle. Long Yuexi appeared, similarly standing proudly in the air. She wielded a purple walking cane in her right hand. Though she looked aged and decrepit, the aura she exuded was no weaker than Shang Jiwei's. It is not determined yet who will live or die. You are already at the end of your line, and you still dare speak tough, Shang Jiwei said disdainfully. Now that the heavenly venerable tier Great Formation had been opened, the Rock Palace was only a piece of cake in her eyes. The others may be spared as long as you put down your weapons. The reincarnation of Tianyun must be captured, and this person. She extended a finger and tapped at the empty air, showing Ling Han's image. This boy must not be harmed. Whoever touches a hair on his head, I will consign you to eternal damnation. Everyone was immediately stunned. Wasn't this the person who had fled into the Rock Palace not too long ago? Why had he now gotten a connection with Shang Jiwei? She actually said that not a single hair on his head was to be touched? Could it be that this was her illegitimate son? Though they were shocked, the members of the Four Seas Palace at least had to abide by her words strictly. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. The members of the Four Seas Palace all shouted. If they could win the battle without fighting, they naturally would not wish to risk their lives in battle. After all, there were not many battle maniacs like Ling Han. Most people cultivated because they desired status, power, and wealth. Meanwhile, the members of the Rock Palace were at a loss. So should they fight or not? The great mountain protective formation that was like a great wall had already been conquered, and the Grand Elder was definitely no match for Wei. Either otherwise they would not have stuck to a defensive strategy, being beaten on by their enemies all this while. Then, if the result was destined to be their defeat, what would be the point of further battle? Those that had long since borne the intent of betrayal immediately threw down their weapons. Now that they had started, a great many people who were indecisive immediately followed their lead, and put down their weapons. There was less than 1/10 of people that were willing to be loyal to the Rock Palace to the death. Long Yuexi couldn't help but sigh. Though she had stayed on guard against any betrayal in the ranks, she had never thought that it would be someone like Celestial King Fuyun. This was the strongest person next to herself, and she had also placed high hopes on the latter. When she died, the Rock Palace would be temporarily delegated under her leadership. She raised her voice and announced, "All disciples, put down your weapons. From this day onwards, the Rock Palace is disbanded." This was cutting their losses. As long as Hunyo could grow to become a 9th Heaven Celestial King in the future, then the Rock Palace would be able to rise up again one day. Otherwise, there was no need for unnecessary sacrifice. Chapter 2133. Going all out in battle. This move of Long Yuexi was cutting their losses. Did she want to have the Rock Palace disbanded? Of course she didn't. However, if the Rock Palace was not disbanded, without the protection of the Heavenly Venerable Tier formation, all of them would be completely slaughtered by the Four Seas Palace. It could not be helped. Their 9th Heaven Celestial King was stronger. In the Celestial Realm, top-tier battle prowess could completely determine the outcome of a battle. It could be claimed that everyone else of the Four Seas Palace could die, but as long as Wei was still there, she could still easily eliminate the Rock Palace. What more when the scales were now leaning in favor of the Four Seas Palace? Thus, protecting what power they had to wait for a day when they could rise up again was the wisest decision to make. Grand Elder. Immediately, countless members of the Rock Palace called out, filled with defiance and fury, wanting nothing more than to commit murder with their eyes alone. Unfortunately, this did not have the slightest meaning. Ding ding ding. More and more people threw their weapons on the ground, and then chose to leave. Only a small minority were still gripping their weapons tightly, determined to battle, and would rather die than surrender. Stupid stubbornness. The members of the Four Seas Palace launched a fierce offensive. The outcome of this battle was already out. From this day onwards, the Rock Palace would cease to exist. Destroying the representative force of the Rock Heaven filled every single member of Four Seas Palace with adrenaline. From this day onwards, their names would be eternally written in history to be admired by later generations. Long Yuexi, I will be sending you on your way today. Wei also unleashed an offensive. If she wanted to kill Tianyun's reincarnation, she would have to get rid of Long Yuexi first. And once Long Yuexi has fallen, the Rock Palace would really be completely destroyed, becoming nothing but another page in history. Long Yuexi gazed meaningfully at Wei. Her initially hunched back gradually straightened, her white locks fluttering. They were actually rapidly turning black in color. Originally, she was very short, but as her back straightened, her figure actually became the same height as a normal human. No, it was even straighter and taller. This was not something as simple as straightening her back, but rather that her whole person's height had been increased greatly. A mountain wind blew past, and Long Yuexi's hair fluttered. It had turned completely black, beautiful and glossy like clouds. Looking at her face, what part of her still looked like an old woman? Instead, she was an exquisite beauty that was in the prime of her youth. Her waist was slender, her breasts bountiful, and her legs long and straight, while her skin was as smooth as jade. Her beauty was not the slightest bit inferior to Wei's. Long Yuexi, you are finally going to stop fleeing? Wei smirked coldly. In the past, she had also been a supreme beauty, and one whose natural talent was astounding. Naturally, her youth should have been eternal, and she would never age. However, she had sustained a serious Dao injury, and she had no choice but to focus all her energy on suppressing her wounds, causing her beauty to age and herself to look like an old woman. And now, Long Yuexi had decided to go all out in battle, forcibly pushing her condition to her strongest prime, so it was natural that her beauty would be restored. However, this would also be her final battle. Even if Wei did not fight her when she exited this state, She would also decline rapidly after her prime. Her Dao injury would take effect, and she would die. Xueqi naturally would not give up the battle. With how proud she was, and after accumulating so many years of fury, how could she be satisfied if she did not kill her enemy with her own hands? It is just a battle. Yuexi was very grand and majestic, naturally exuding the aura of one who dominated the whole world. 4 ninth heaven celestial kings like themselves, they were just that slightest bit away from advancing to the heavenly venerable tier. Thus, it was natural that they were all incredibly assertive. However, this slight gap could not be filled no matter how much they tried. Hence, ninth heaven celestial kings were only celestial kings. Xueqi gave a battle cry, and her figure flew furiously as she charged towards Yuexi. 9 seals shone brilliantly on her body, representing that she was a supreme empress that was practically unmatched in this world. She did not dare to underestimate Yuexi in the slightest, and still summoned an ancient mirror. It floated behind her, shooting out multiple streaks of light. When these streaks of light landed on her, they could further improve her battle prowess, and when they landed on Yuexi, they could weaken the battle prowess of her opponent slightly. This was the inheritance treasure of the Four Seas Palace, Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror, a ninth heaven celestial tool. There was no difference in strength between divine metals, but once it was forged into celestial tools, there would be a difference in power. How could it be that the celestial tool that was forged by a first heaven celestial tool would be capable of matching one that was forged by a ninth heaven celestial king? This Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was forged by assimilating the martial intent of the generations of elites of the Four Seas Palace accumulated through the secret techniques of as many as 3 ninth heaven celestial kings, so its power was naturally extraordinary. It could definitely be considered as a ninth heaven celestial king by itself. In Xueqi's hands, the Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror was naturally fully activated. There was no need to expend any power belonging to Xueqi herself, and it could attack automatically. Yuexi humped, and spread open her arms. A majestic light flew out from the mountains, towards her. It only stopped when it had almost reached her. Upon a closer look, this was a suit of armor. Rock armor. In the past, when the rock had attained great accomplishment in its cultivation level, it had plucked out a tendon, a bone, and a horn from its own body, and fused them with 7 divine metals to forge this armor. After further going through endless refinement of 3 generations of ninth heaven celestial kings, it had naturally become a ninth heaven celestial tool. Wang, the rock armor automatically covered Yuexi's body. An ancient seal shone, and immediately exuded boundless might. Celestial chi diffused, blocking the blazing light of the Great Sun Heavenly King Mirror. It could not bear the slightest effect on Yuexi anymore. Boom, boom, boom. The 2 great ninth heaven celestial kings began an intense battle. Even the dome of heaven was trembling. Stars that were in the proximity were struck down, turned into bits of rock that fell from the skies, and those stars that were further could not escape, either. However, they simply fell whole from the skies. Multitudes of stars dropped, and the landing of one could blast out a great ocean. Naturally, many lives were lost. When celestial kings fought, it was like doomsday had come. What more when it was a ninth heaven-level great battle? Just think, when the force of darkness had invaded in the past, countless celestial kings had burst out into great battle. In fact, even the entirety of the rock heaven had been struck to the point of breaking apart from the celestial realm and falling into the void. Beneath them, everyone was stunned for a moment before starting the battle again. Amidst sounds of fighting, the members of the Rock Palace fell against the masses. They were outnumbered. The gap was too overwhelming. But there were some that still could not let it go. It was clear that they would be able to live as long as they gave up resistance, but they still chose to fight to the bitter end. Blood sprayed, and it was a tragic sight. Ling Han never feared battle, but now he did not know what he was supposed to do. This was not his battle. Even if he was leaning more in favor of the Rock Palace because of Hunyo, to ask him to suddenly raise weapons against people he did not even know at all was still something that was very, very difficult for him. He lacked the desire to battle to ignite his fighting spirit. Run! Yuexi's voice rang out in his mind. Bring Yun with you and flee. Run as far as you can. From now onwards, I will entrust Yun to you. Ling Han came back to his wits. Hunyo was still inside the Black Tower, and while this precious treasure was very awesome, could it really block a ninth heaven celestial king? He did not have the slightest hesitation, and ran towards the foot of the mountain with an abrupt turn. Halt! A dividing soul tear of the Four Seas Palace stood in his way. Young master, please wait for a moment. I am sure that the Lady Imperial Empress has words to speak with you. Since Shang Jiwei had threatened that anyone who dared to touch a hair on Ling Han's head would be torn to pieces, it was clear how important Ling Han was. Thus, it was natural that he could not be allowed to leave. Moreover, Tianyin's reincarnation had not been found yet. She could be in anyone's spatial god tool, so it was even more natural that no one could be allowed to leave. Get lost! Ling Han shot out a punch. Pang! That person was instantly sent flying, becoming a tiny dot in the skies. Chapter 2134. Repeated defeats. However, that person had just been sent flying when another person came to block his way. Yet this time, it was an Immortal Palace tier. Immortal Palace tier against Dividing Soul tier meant an absolute domination, and there was no one that could be exempted. Thus, this person stood with his arms crossed behind his back, looking as confident as if he had everything under control. Young Master Ling, was it? Why are you in such a rush to leave? With Lady Imperial Empress being so concerned about you, perhaps you may become our young Imperial Emperor in future. Our Four Seas Palace is a first-class force in the celestial realm. This kind of honor and wealth is something that others would not even dare to dream of. Yet it is within arm's reach for you. I am really dying of envy. Ling Han laughed and said, Are you getting lost or not? If you aren't, then if I ever become that so-called young Imperial Emperor, the first head I will be cutting off would be yours. Would you believe me? Fuck! That Immortal Palace tier's face involuntarily twitched, with him feeling like he had shot himself in the foot. Immediately, the confidence in his expression had completely vanished. Indeed, with how highly Shang Jiwei prized Ling Han, even if she did not appoint Ling Han as young Imperial Emperor, the title of Holy Son or something of sort was definitely possible. And the other man was just a mere Immortal Palace tier, and could just barely be considered an elite in the Four Seas Palace. If Ling Han really wanted to make life difficult for him, who would be able to speak up on his behalf? Then should he just step aside? But what if the crime of letting Ling Han flee was placed on him, and Shang Jiwei blamed him? Would he be able to bear the consequences? Involuntarily, he was trapped in a tight spot, and felt incredible regret. If he had known, then he would have settled the matter just by knocking the other party out. Now that he had thrown out these words, he had also tossed the difficult problem in front of him. Taking advantage of the opening when this person was hesitating, Ling Han immediately channeled a movement technique, breaking into a run and fleeing. Young Master Ling, you had better stay. This person moved, grabbing out at Ling Han's shoulder. He had made his decision. Even if Ling Han wanted to make things difficult for him, it would only happen in the future. But if he allowed Ling Han to escape, then Shang Jiwei's punishment would be close at hand. He could only hate himself secretly for being so nosy and determined to run out, leading to the presently difficult situation. He faltered slightly because the space within 3,000 meters of him had all warped, as if it had become multiple mirrors, and there was a Ling Han in every single mirror. He knew that these had to be false images, but these false images were too real. Whether it was appearance or aura, there was not the slightest bit of difference from the original, reaching the point where he could not distinguish which one was the real one at all. Quite interesting, but don't you know that the gap in cultivation level between you and me is really too wide? The Immortal Palace tier humphed, and stretched out his right hand. A seal that looked like a fierce tiger lit up on the back of his hand. Boom! A shock wave rippled out. Pang pang pang! The warped space crumbled, and the Ling Han that was in them only trembled before shattering. It was only the time for a single breath, and the 3,000 meters wide mirror space had completely collapsed. As for Ling Han, that Immortal Palace tier realized, much to his shock, that this brat had actually appeared 1,000 miles away in the distance, moving so fast that he was about to run out of the range of his vision. What was going on? Right under his nose, Ling Han had actually managed to escape and flee. With a battle cry, the man's figure moved, and set off in rapid pursuit of Ling Han. In a few steps, he had already caught up with Ling Han. He once again stretched out his hand to grab him, intending to capture Ling Han. I won't believe this. A great Immortal Palace tier, and I still can't capture a Dividing Soul tier? Ling Han used the same trick again, using void space once more. Countless mirror images appeared. There were millions of him, and it was impossible to distinguish which one was real at all. I get it now. That immortal palace tier laughed loudly. Ling Han's void space actually surpassed the range of 3,000 meters, but Ling Han had deliberately limited its size, yet placed his true self outside of this range. Then, the opponent would be fooled by his first impression, and think that Ling Han was within this range. Then, even after he crumbled this space, he could still do nothing against Ling Han. Good one, brat, to actually use secret techniques as nimbly as this, what a prodigy. He had also gained the desire to cherish talent, yet knew very well that he was not qualified to take Ling Han as a disciple at all. Even a ninth heaven celestial king regarded Ling Han as very important, so what place did that leave him? With a burst of celestial power, the mirror space was immediately shattered once more, and while he was faltering, he saw that Ling Han had again appeared 1,000 miles away. Fuck. Being fooled once was forgivable, but he really should not have fallen for the same trick again. Was he an idiot? That immortal palace tier couldn't help but feel a sliver of anger. Ling Han had not changed his tricks at all. Yet, the 6,000-meter-wide mirror space he had spread out now was still not his limit. Thus, he had once again managed to successfully deceive him. But would you be capable of escaping? Just how much weaker is the dividing soul tier compared to immortal palace tier? Even if you used all your techniques, so what? You still will not be able to escape from the palm of my hand. His figure streaked out again, and caught up with Ling Han for the third time. He stretched out his palm, and he did not change his strategy of attack, either. This was also a kind of pride. Ling Han smiled, and void space was spread out again. This time, it encompassed an area of 12,000 meters. I have already seen through your tricks. That immortal palace tier declared proudly. Boom, his large hand spread out, enshrouding a total of 24,000 meters in space. This is your limit, isn't it? The large hand pressed down, and all the images were immediately shattered. However, Ling Han's true self still did not appear. The immortal palace tier's expression immediately became incredibly dark, as if someone had delivered a harsh slap to his face. That was how embarrassing it was. Ling Han was still 1,000 miles away. This brat could actually unfold his mirror space for more than 12,000 meters. The immortal palace tier was really stunned. A mere earth soul actually could control the regulations of space over such a large area. This was too unbelievable. Old Chen, just how many times have you moved? And you actually haven't been able to take down a mere dividing soul tier yet? Someone laughed derisively. This was a colleague from the Four Seas Palace, but their usual relations really could not be considered very amicable. Old Chen humphed, and with another step, he caught up once more with Ling Han, pulling him down with a hand. Come on then, I refuse to believe that your mirror space can have an even wider range than my attack range. However, he miscalculated. This time, Ling Han did not cast his mirror doppelgangers, but instead used the mirrors to advance rapidly. Added with a burst from the regulations of lightning, his speed reached a level that even immortal palace tiers would be moved at for an instant. Xiao, he fled before Old Chen's attack landed, escaping by a hair's breadth. This time, even those ascending origin tiers cast their eyes over, locking down on Ling Han. This dividing soul tier was truly a little freakish. Holy Daughter and Ran is only like this as well, right? I thought that Holy Daughter and Ran would definitely become the next Imperial Empress, but if this brat joins our Four Seas Palace, with how freakishly talented he is, and added with how the Imperial Empress prizes him, it would definitely have a major impact on Holy Daughter and Ran. There is definitely going to be a good show to watch. The members of the Four Seas Palace all conversed spiritedly. The battle had essentially been decided. There were only a limited few that were still stubbornly resisting, allowing them to have enough free, leisurely time to interact. Ling Han did not flee any longer. Though he had successfully escaped from the hands of an immortal palace tier 4 times, and could do so even 5 or 10 times more, there would ultimately be a time when techniques could no longer be used. Hide into the Black Tower? That was a question. There were hundreds of celestial kings here, and when Shang Wei got a hand free, the power of a ninth heaven celestial king was even more unpredictable. Old Chen, do you just have this little bit of power? He laughed loudly, beginning to mock old Qian. Old Qian's face was flushed red, feeling like there were countless eyes directed on him, and making him want nothing more than to find a hole that he could bury himself in. He moved once more, grabbing out towards Ling Han. Chapter 2135. Xiao Gu was also good at attracting animosity. Yeah. A familiar call rang out, and a streak of light rapidly shot over. Old Qian was stunned, and had not even come back to his wits when this streak of light had already crashed into his back. He was instantly harshly slammed into the ground, landing solidly. The speed of the light streak also decreased, and everyone could see it clearly. This was actually a snow-white bone. The bone floated in midair entwined by threads of light, slowly taking human form. Who else could it be but Xiao Gu? Yeah. When Xiao Gu spotted Ling Han, he appeared very elated. Pretty girl, give me a smile. Milord, don't do anything foolish. Wife, our hoe should be sent for repair. Xiao Gu immediately began chattering and mimicking word after word, with completely no sign of stopping anytime soon. Everyone was watching in shock, dumbfounded. This bone had come in such an astonishing manner, but what was it actually blurting out now? Meanwhile, Ling Han laughed loudly. For these 10,000 years, who knew how many conversations Xiao Gu had listened in on? He was naturally feeling very suffocated, so how could he be satisfied without mimicking to his heart's content? Xiao Gu, help me escape, he said. Xiao Gu, help me escape, Xiao Gu said as well, his expression completely serious. Fuck. Ling Han sighed plaintively. Thus Xiao Gu was always undependable when it came to crucial moments. Humph, since you are already here, then both of you should stay behind. An ascending origin tear moved, grabbing at both Ling Han and Xiao Gu. Humph, since you are already here. Xiao Gu copied the words, stretching out his hand as well, and grabbing out at the other. Pang! The two hands crashed into each other, and the light of regulations exploded. The large hand that Xiao Gu had extended burst through the other's large hand on an unstoppable course, continuing the course to grab ahead. Not good, that ascending origin tear exclaimed in shock, and hurriedly turned around and fled. Not good. Xiao Gu did not realize that he was presently fighting another person at all. He too exclaimed in shock and turned and fled. This. Everyone watched this happen, their faces twitching madly. How could he play around with someone like that? That was going too far. That ascending origin tear wanted to throw up blood in his fury. If I can't match you, it would be due to my inferior strength, but you actually copy the way that I flee. What kind of horrible humiliation is that to me? This could not be tolerated. It was unacceptable. Ling Han rubbed his chin. Xiao Gu was clearly adorably dumb, but why could he instantly infuriate others to the extent that they would be hopping mad? If it had been the large black dog, that would have been logical. It was extraordinarily despicable by nature, and it would be nothing strange even if it managed to drive a celestial king to death with fury. Feng Tang stepped back. A figure descended from the skies, enshrouded in extraordinary light. A celestial king. That ascending origin tear hurriedly paid his greetings respectfully, and stepped aside. A celestial king, no matter which heaven they were at, was still a supreme being. Anyone who had not reached this level could only treat them with utter respect. That celestial king looked at Xiao Gu, and revealed an expression of shock. It was clearly only a bone, but why would it have such might? When a celestial king acted, they naturally had no reservations. Stretching out his hand, he grabbed out at Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu was in high spirits. With so many people playing with him, this was fun. He also stretched out his hand, copying the other's movement. Humph! That celestial king showed a hint of displeasure. I am a second heaven celestial king, and you think I am just any random minor character? Pang! The two hands crashed into one another, and one of them immediately crumbled. Unexpectedly, the hand that was shattered was actually the one that had been sent out by that celestial king. Boom! The large hand that Xiao Gu sent out continued to grab out at that celestial king. What? That celestial king exclaimed in shock, and hurriedly turned and fled. What? Xiao Gu imitated him to perfection, and also turned around and fled. This. Everyone's cheek was twitching. They felt that Xiao Gu was really too insulting. It's enough that you won, so why do you have to go so far? They were both celestial kings, and had cultivated to this kind of height, so how could they be so tasteless? Wow! That celestial king had already turned around, fuming mad with fury. Wow you! Xiao Gu also bared his teeth, copying him to absolute perfection. This was too far, this was really going too far. To say nothing of the fact that the celestial king wanted to commit murder, even the others were shaking their heads continuously. How could he do that? I, Lu Feng, swear that we cannot exist together. That celestial king roared furiously, his expression twisted in anger. Men could be killed, but couldn't be insulted. A celestial king was noble and proud, standing equal to heaven and earth, so how could they be allowed to be slighted? I, Lu Feng, swear that we cannot exist together. Xiao Gu's expression was similarly twisted, and he was practically howling with fury. By now, he had improved further. Not only could he mimic words, he would also add in some input of expression, appearing to be even more exaggerated. Everyone was about to pass out. Not only were you mimicking others as mockery, you were even stealing their names. This would mean a deadly feud. Lu Feng. Another elite descended from the skies. 5-colored light enshrouded him, representing that he was a fifth heaven celestial king. Lord Wu Hang. The celestial king from before hurriedly greeted him respectfully. There were a total of 3 heavens between the two of them. He needed to maintain an attitude of absolute respect. Wu Heng nodded. His expression was slightly solemn. You are no match for this person. Lu Feng was a little defiant. Though he had fallen into a disadvantage in the previous clash, he still had a very strong confidence that if he went all out in battle, it would not be certain that he would lose. However, Wu Heng actually determined that he was no match for Xiao Gu so decisively, which made him feel very defiant. He stepped back, giving way to Wu Heng. Sir, you are really outrageously bold, to dare to interfere even in the matters of our 4 Seas Palace. Wu Heng said menacingly. Sir, you are really. Xiao Gu was extremely happy, mimicking as he liked, and driving others mad with fury. Wu Heng's expression involuntarily darkened. You are a celestial king yourself, so what is so fun about mimicking others like this? You are a... Xiao Gu's expression darkened even further, looking completely livid. Damn you! Wu Heng was furious. With a soft exclamation, he moved. Boom, endless immortal flames burned brightly and ferociously. He sent out a punch, an ancient seal of great Tao on his fist as the blow headed to suppress Xiao Gu. Damn you! Xiao Gu similarly looked like he had flown into a fury, and approached in anger. Boom! Because Xiao Gu was copying completely, their 2 fists naturally crashed into one another, generating a world-shaking boom. Celestial light surged out as if the heaven and earth were being split apart, evolving into millions of worlds. Boom! Wu Heng was sent flying from the force while drawing out an arc in the skies, blood spraying madly from his whole body. When Xiao Gu saw this, he made an ah, and also rolled backwards, forcing out blood to pour from his body. However, his body itself had been copied, so to say nothing of just bleeding a little, he would be fine even if he was beheaded. Everyone couldn't help but feel speechless. They had never seen someone so despicable. Ling Han was feeling gratified though. Xiao Gu was no longer just simply mimicking, but had already inserted some of his own performing skills. For example, in that exclamation of ah, Wu Heng had not released such a pained cry. It was added in by Xiao Gu himself. There was improvement. Who knew, endless years later, Xiao Gu could possibly awaken his intelligence a second time, and ascend Tao once more. Meanwhile, Lu Feng's expression was filled with grief. He now knew that Wu Heng had not seen wrongly. He really was no match for Xiao Gu. Even a 5th heaven celestial king had been sent flying. Even if the strength of both sides was close to equal, suppressing him would only be the matter of a few moves. What was more terrifying was that this perhaps wasn't even Xiao Gu's full strength. 6th heaven? 7th heaven? 8th heaven? Or even a supreme being of 9th heaven. Xiao, another celestial king descended, 7-colored light entwined around him. His whole body was also brimming with the air of primal chaos. His features could not be distinguished clearly, but the pressure that came from a supreme being was rippling out. Seventh Heaven Celestial King. Chapter 2136. Long Yuexi dies. The Four Seas Palace had abundant wealth. When a second Heaven Celestial King was outmatched, a fifth Heaven Celestial King would immediately jump out. And when a fifth Heaven Celestial King was outmatched, a seventh Heaven Celestial King would emerge. Finally, didn't they still have an overlord like a ninth Heaven Celestial King? You dare interfere in the business of our Four Seas Palace? I will let you know your own measure. This seventh Heaven Celestial King moved decisively, and a massive palm immediately descended from the skies, pressing down on Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu naturally copied him exactly. After repeating his words, he immediately pressed out his own palm towards the other. He did not know how to dodge at all. Immediately, he was blasted solidly by the massive palm, and that seventh Heaven Celestial King's figure flashed, and appeared out of the attack range of this palm strike from Xiao Gu. Hong, long, long, a seventh Heaven Celestial King had moved. This might was really too domineering. Even if this was the Rock Palace, where every mountain rock was tempered to an incredibly high degree by the rock, a gigantic pit was still created from the blast, and Xiao Gu had also disappeared in this depression. Ha 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 ha, now that the spiritual mountain Celestial King has moved, it is very easy as expected. That's right. The spiritual mountain Celestial King has been a super monarch tier in the past, and now has hopes of attaining 8th heaven. His strength could even match some weaker 8th heaven Celestial Kings. To actually dare toy around with the spiritual mountain Celestial King, he really was seeking his own death. The members of the Four Seas Palace were all smirking coldly. In terms of cultivation level, the spiritual mountain Celestial King was ranked 3rd in the Four Seas Palace, but his strength was inferior only to Xiangjiwei. He was the second strongest elite of the Four Seas Palace. If he moved personally, how many in this world would he actually be incapable of suppressing? However, the spiritual mountain Celestial King did not smile. Instead, he became solemn. With a light wave, the dust and rocks that were flying in the deep pit were immediately swept away. At the bottom of the vacant pit, a person immediately appeared. It could not be called a person, but rather a bone. It was snow white and crystalline, and possessed an incredibly ancient seal, exuding an aura of age. Xiao Gu. The members of the Four Seas Palace had all seen very clearly that when Xiao Gu had flown here, he was just a bone, and now he was still a bone. What did that mean? That he had not been injured at all. Hiss, the move from a 7th Heaven Celestial King actually did not succeed. To call it a complete failure would be inappropriate as well. At least, the body that Xiao Gu had formed had been shattered, which had still proven how strong the spiritual mountain Celestial King was. Previously, neither Lu Feng or Wu Hang had been able to do that at all. Just what exactly are you? The spiritual mountain Celestial King asked in a low voice. The other's true body was just a bone, but was there such a powerful bone in this world? Just what exactly are you? Xiao Gu copied his words as he reformed his body. The spiritual mountain Celestial King stared at Xiao Gu for a moment, and dismissed the thought of communicating with Xiao Gu. Whether Xiao Gu was deliberately mimicking him, or only knew how to speak through mimicry, it was clear that he could not possibly say anything valuable. Then, what was the point of wasting words? There was only one thing left to do. Battle. The spiritual mountain Celestial King moved without hesitation, and began fighting Xiao Gu. Xiao Gu's expression was completely one of puzzlement. Why aren't you talking anymore? What is fun about just fighting and not talking? He dealt with the battle in a passive way, merely parrying without bothering to counter. The spiritual mountain Celestial King was indeed very strong. He was an overlord among monarch tiers, his battle prowess having surpassed even 7th heaven, and advanced into 8th heaven. It should be known that there was the saying that every level of Celestial King tier brought one closer to ascending the heavens. With a difference of a minor level, that meant a world of difference in strength. Regarding the saying that King tiers could be invincible among their peers, or how Emperor tiers would be able to crush their opponents that were a minor level superior, that was completely useless in the Celestial King tier. In truth, it was very rare that King tiers would be able to advance into the Celestial King tier, unless they gained incredibly good fortune in the future. Only Emperor tiers could possibly become Celestial Kings, and even then it was just a portion of them. It was only definite that Monarch tiers could become Celestial Kings, And no matter what, they would become 4th heaven, or 5th heaven celestial kings at least, but to speak of having tier-surpassing battle prowess, even monarch tiers could not possibly have it. Only super monarch tiers could achieve that. The spiritual mountain celestial king was one such monarch tier. His cultivation level was 7th heaven celestial king tier, but his battle prowess had reached 8th heaven celestial king tier. In fact, even among 8th heaven celestial kings, his battle prowess could place him in the middle ranks. This was too strong. To say nothing of the fact that Xiao Gu was presently muddle-headed, and did not know to counter at all. Even if he rose up in resistance, it was definitely impossible that he would be a match for the spiritual mountain celestial king. This spiritual mountain celestial king could already be compared to the Black Dragon King. However, Xiao Gu had an astonishing advantage, and that was the strength of his defense was astounding. In truth, he was just a bone. If the bone was not damaged, he would be fine, and the toughness of his bone could compare to divine metals. With how tough divine metal was, even a 9th heaven celestial king could not break it by force. They could only slowly melt it down through the power of regulation. Thus, if the spiritual mountain celestial king wanted to pose a true threat to Xiao Gu, he could only use the power of regulation to refine Xiao Gu. Otherwise, it would only be wasted effort. But to accomplish this was really much too difficult. Xiao Gu had terrifyingly high accomplishments in regulations of space. No matter how the spiritual mountain celestial king trapped him, it was useless. Xiao Gu would still be able to easily break free. This caused the battle to sink into a stalemate. It was clear that the spiritual mountain celestial king was completely in an advantageous position. Yet no matter how hard he tried, he could not turn his advantage into a victory. Because Ling Han was already trapped, no one made any further move on him. After all, someone had experienced a loss at his hands before. If anyone made a move on Ling Han, it would definitely force them into a dilemma. In that case, they might just as well trap Ling Han here. In the skies, for great celestial kings battled strongly. Shang Jiwei against Long Yuexi, and Xiao Gu against the spiritual mountain celestial king. Both battles were incredibly intense. However, there was practically no one that could see these two battles, because these four were really too powerful. Not only were they moving at an astonishing speed, their attacks were the same as well. What others could see were actually just the halos of bright light that exploded in flashes. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time trickled by. It would be nothing strange for great battles between celestial kings to last a few years, or even tens of thousands of years. Thus, everyone was not anxious. The rock heaven had existed for countless epochs, and so what if they had to spend several or even several tens of thousands of years to exterminate it? But merely 10 days later, one battle suddenly stopped, and no further brilliant light that could dazzle the heavens surged. Which battle was it? Shang Jiwei against Long Yuexi? Or Xiao Gu against the spiritual mountain celestial king? In only a while, the answer was revealed. A figure suddenly dropped rapidly from the skies, and landed on the ground loudly. The two massive wings spread behind her back exuded an endless boundless might, and the skin that was exposed was covered with dragon scales. This person could not be seen clearly at all. But there was no need to see the face, and they could confirm that this person was Long Yuexi because these were the wings of the rock. Could it be that Long Yuexi had won? The members of the Four Seas Palace were all stunned, while the members of the Rock Palace were overjoyed. If the Grand Elder won, then there would be no need for the Rock Palace to be disbanded, and this would have also dealt with a strong enemy like the Four Seas Palace. In the future, the Rock Palace would be able to regain its domineering stand as a 9th heaven celestial king tier force. Pang, another person flew down and landed, an ancient mirror shining brilliantly behind her. Shang Jiwei. Shang Jiwei, you have won, but you have also lost, Long Yuexi said. When she said the first word, her voice was still very clear, but her voice became older as she spoke the second, and the dragon scales covering her body were also falling off piece by piece. Her black hair turned gray, and then from gray it turned white. In an instant, she had turned back into an old woman. She laughed loudly, and then came to an abrupt stop. Not a single sign of life could be seen. Crack! Suddenly, a thunderous crack resounded in the heaven and earth, followed by an endless rain of blood. A lamenting sound was heard loudly, causing everyone to feel a sadness and grief rise up from the bottoms of their hearts, and when they wiped their eyes, they were filled with tears. A celestial king had died, and the heaven and earth grieved. Chapter 2137. Partiality. Long Yuexi had died. A celestial king of her generation, a ninth heaven overlord, practically the strongest existence in the celestial realm, someone who had endured countless epochs, and borne witness to changes over the ages, had still finally died and returned to dust. If it were not for the fact that she could not let it go, she should have died long ago, several epochs ago. Grand Elder. The members of the Rock Palace all wept. Even Elder Fuyun showed a hint of grief in her expression. She had sided with the Four Seas Palace because she was incredibly realistic. However, it did not mean that her heart was already leaning in favor of the Four Seas Palace. Long live the Imperial Empress. The members of the Four Seas Palace, meanwhile, were all excited. With Long Yuexi's death, the Rock Palace was finally conquered. Shang Jiwei did not feel any kind of happiness. Instead, she showed a disappointed and frustrated expression. Perhaps it was Long Yuexi's final words that pierced her heart. Long ago, several epochs ago, she had already lost to Tianyun, and it was a complete, absolute loss at that. Tianyun and Yuan Shang had both long since died, and now Long Yuexi had also died. So what if Shang Jiwei was the one to have the last laugh? When the flames of her vengeance were calmed, what meaning would there be left to her life? After I kill Tianyun's reincarnation, and settle the matters of the palace, I will go to the doorway of darkness, and battle with those elites from the foreign realm right until I bleed the last drop of my blood, she murmured. Pacifying the storm of darkness, this was Yuan Shang's strongest wish. Though I cannot realize it on his behalf, I will definitely try my best. Long Yuexi, though you have been my lifelong enemy, any crimes would be cleared with death. Taking into consideration the fact that you, too, are a ninth heaven celestial king, I shall offer you a funeral, she declared loudly. With a wave of her hand, boom, the indestructible rock mountains were forcibly torn apart, as if they were merely a painting being unfurled. With another wave of her hand, she delivered Long Yuexi's body into the mountain range that was torn open. Then, with her clapping her hands together, the mountains immediately returned to their original state, as if nothing had happened previously at all. This was the strength of a ninth heaven celestial king. Others would only manage to bump a few rocks off after fighting for so long, but she could easily cause damage. Enough, she spoke up again, filled with dominance. Greetings, Imperial Empress. The spiritual mountain celestial king descended, half kneeling in front of her, and appearing incredibly reverent, but the lowered gaze held a very strong adoration. He has always loved Shang Jiwei, and the fact that he was willing to stay as a number 2 in the Four Seas Palace was also because of this. However, he had never dared to confess his feelings, fearing that after he was rejected, Shang Jiwei would expel him from the Four Seas Palace. Xiao Gu had his own principles when he was mimicking and impersonating. Though he saw how the spiritual mountain celestial king had half knelt, he did not kneel down alongside him, but rather went off in a daze on the sidelines. So it's old bone demon. Shang Jiwei looked at Xiao Gu. It was rumored that you had already died several epochs ago, and it looks like the rumors were not false. The consciousness that was born from the celestial bone has already died out, and the intelligence of this newly born one is no more than that of a 3-year-old. She had excellent insight, and could tell Xiao Gu's origins with a single glance. So it's old bone demon. Xiao Gu was very interested, and began mimicking her words. Shang Jiwei did not take offense. Her gaze turned to Ling Han, a complex expression appearing on her face. After a long while she finally said, "You are Yuan Shang's disciple, and that would make you my disciple, my child." When these words were spoken, a storm of protest rose among the members of the Four Seas Palace. A disciple was one thing, as Shang Jiwei had a total of 3 personal disciples. But a child. Shang Jiwei had never married, so it was naturally impossible that she would have any children. In that case, what kind of privileges would Ling Han have? Becoming the young imperial emperor of Four Seas Palace. Though everyone was unwilling to accept this, no one dared to say anything. They could only feel envy. The Four Seas Palace had always been ruled by Shang Jiwei's word alone. This was also the privilege due to a ninth heaven celestial king, the high and lofty status of a divinity. You are Yuan Shang's disciple. Xiao Gu was also mimicking from the side, copying Shang Jiwei's expression and actions completely, and causing Ling Han to involuntarily feel gloomy. You actually want to become my father as well? Hand over Tianyun's reincarnation. Wei looked at Ling Han, her eyes holding benevolence. She was really treating Ling Han like her own child. Hand over Tianyun's, Xiao Gu repeated. Ling Han pretended to be puzzled and asked, what Tianyun's reincarnation? Tianyun's reincarnation has definitely not left the rock heaven, and she is not in anyone's spatial god tool, either. Then there is only one possibility, and that is she is inside that Yuan Sheng forged, spatial god tool stated calmly. However, she deliberately skipped over the name of the Tower of Three Realms. It seemed like she knew that the effects of this name were overwhelming. Xiao Gu still copied, completely shamelessly. Ling Han was inwardly stunned. Wei had only done a sweep with her divine sense, and she had already scanned over every single person's spatial god tool. As expected of a ninth heaven celestial king, she was too strong. However, there was absolutely no way that he would hand Hunyao over. Thus he said, Aunt Wei, Senior Tianyun has long since died. The Hunyao now is only Hunyao. She only possesses the martial imprint of Senior Tianyun, yet is a completely independent personality. She is only a junior of yours, so why should you lower yourself to her level? To play the fool with a ninth heaven celestial king was clearly a very stupid thing to do. However, Ling Han was truly shameless, and had even directly addressed her as Aunt Wei, causing the members of the Four Seas Palace to exclaim at his shamelessness. He was really too quick to go along with her lead. However, this address of Aunt Wei made Wei feel elated. If she had been able to lay down her love for Yuan Shang, she would not have possibly targeted the Rock Palace for so many years. As the saying went, the stronger the love, the stronger the hate that would result. What made her most despondent was the fact that she had never gotten any recognition. However, when Ling Han addressed her as Aunt Wei, it was equivalent to giving her status on behalf of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. To Wei, what could be more important than that? Involuntarily she smiled and said, You have a really sweet tongue, child. You have a really. Xiao Gu copied her words earnestly and tirelessly. However, as long as it is related to Tianyun, then it has to be destroyed. I cannot allow any sliver of her to remain in this world. Wei declared decisively. Her hatred towards Tianyun was not something that could be resolved by just the words Aunt Wei. Aunt Wei, it is easy to make enemies, but hard to resolve grudges. It would be better that you just let it go, Ling Han advised from the sidelines. Wei's eyes blazed. You are merely besotted by that little girl's beauty. It is not true love. I have a disciple who is as beautiful as a celestial maiden. She is definitely in no way inferior to that little girl. Her temperament is gentle, and she has excellent natural talent in cultivation. I will make the decision and betroth her to you. She would be a truly good match for you. Hearing these words, the members of the Four Seas Palace were all dumbfounded. Wei had a total of 3 disciples, but only one of them was female. Thus, she had to be speaking of Holy Daughter and Ranj. True, Holy Daughter and Ran was extraordinarily talented in cultivation, and practically looked like she would become the second Wei. Furthermore, she was also as beautiful as a celestial maiden. She was a truly exquisite beauty, but to say that she had a gentle temperament. Everyone shook their heads in unison, filled with disbelief. Holy Daughter and Ran definitely had absolutely no relation with these words. This woman was incredibly proud, just like a peacock spreading its tail feathers. To say nothing of peers, even in Immortal Palace tier and Ascending Origin tier, there were not many that she truly paid any regard to. If she knew that Wei wanted to marry her off to Ling Han, she would probably explode. Furthermore, just how much did Wei dote on Ling Han? Wei had always considered Holy Daughter and Ran as her own daughter, yet now she was easily betrothing her hand to another like this. She did not even bother to ask, so it was clear just how partial she was to Ling Han, right? This was very much to be envied. The members of the Four Seas Palace all looked at Ling Han, and even a great many celestial kings were no exception. Chapter 2138. Four Seas City. Ling Han shook his head and smiled. Aunt Wei, I already have a beautiful wife, and am fully satisfied. There is no need to involve others for my sake. No. Wei shook her head resolutely. She had not succeeded in her own romance, which caused her to develop an extremist personality. Moreover, Ling Han was the heir of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, while An Ran was her disciple. As she saw it, this was the continuation of the affections from the previous generation, and could compensate for her regrets. One refused repeatedly, while the other was forcibly coercing him, and they bargained over and over again. Everyone was speechless. Was this still a ninth heaven celestial king? How was it that she now seemed like a matchmaker? Moreover, if Holy Daughter An Ran knew about this, she would definitely fly into a thunderous rage. I have not complained about you yet, and you actually dare to reject me? Or so she'd say. Child, you really are stubborn. Xiao shook her head, but her eyes were filled with doting adoration. She had truly taken Ling Han to be her own son, and was using this kind of manner to pretend that she had finally married the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. She did not bother to talk any further with Ling Han. With a grab of her hand, Ling Han could not resist at all, and she had used her great power to grab him over, turning him into a mustard seed. We return to the palace, she exclaimed. Immediately, the masses subsided like floodwaters. Meanwhile, Xiao directly tore a hole into space, and traveled to the Four Seas Palace with a leap. She had not achieved Tao through regulations of space, but having been a ninth heaven celestial king for several epochs, she had abundant time to cultivate other regulations of great Tao as well. Thus, she could naturally cast space teleportation easily. Practically every ninth heaven celestial king was strong in every area. Thus, to dominate over your peers, and become an overlord even among ninth heaven celestial kings was incredibly difficult. The spiritual mountain celestial king also tore a rip into space, and followed Xiao. He had not reached ninth heaven, but even with his natural talent, breaking through one heaven would need boundless time. He would be blocked by the cultivation level barrier for several 100 million years without advancing the slightest inch. Thus, he naturally would also be cultivating other regulations in his free time, and space and time were definitely the best options for him. However, even if a celestial king was going to study these two regulations, they would need corresponding celestial medicines, or corresponding source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, if they just relied on their own studies, their progress could be considered extremely minor. Thus, he was very soon left so far behind Xiao that he could not even see a sign of her. His brow furrowed in a slight frown. There was something troubling him. At first, he had planned to confess his feelings to Xiao after destroying the Rock Palace because Xiao would have already severed the last link she had with her old love. Yet now, Ling Han had actually popped out, causing Xiao motherly affection to overflow. This had disrupted his plans completely. He loved Xiao, so he naturally could not allow Xiao to have another man in her heart, even if she only considered this man as a child or nephew. Thus, he considered Ling Han as a thorn in his side. There was another reason. His disciple, Lin Xian, was also extremely captivated by An Ran, and now Xiao actually planned to betroth An Ran to Ling Han. Then, Lin Xian's hopes would naturally come to nothing. He was also very fond of this disciple of his, and considered him his own son. Now that his daughter-in-law was being taken, he was naturally displeased about it. These two reasons compounded together caused the spiritual mountain celestial king's killing intent to soar. Of course, there was definitely no possibility that he would make a move on Ling Han. If he did make a move, with Xiao insight, she would definitely be able to tell. By then, even if Xiao did not kill him on the basis of their previous relations, she would definitely still mercilessly expel him, to say the least. It would be eternally impossible for there to be any outcome between the two of them. However, was there any need for him to act personally when killing a mere dividing soul tier? There were more than enough elites that could kill this brat. For example, his disciple, Lin Xian, was already at first secret of the Immortal Palace tier, and was a monarch tier at that. Wouldn't suppressing Ling Han be a very simple matter for him? There were too many cases of failing to pull back in time in a spar, and accidentally killing someone. Even Xiao couldn't do anything about that, could she? Moreover, with how proud An Ran was, if she found out that Xiao had betrothed her to Ling Han, she too would probably be stomping with fury, and be the first to jump out and deal with Ling Han. An Ran was also at first secret, and her battle prowess was in fact slightly superior even to Lin Xian's. There would be abundant opportunities for murder. The Four Seas Palace was quite far away from the Rock Palace. Thus, even a ninth heaven celestial king would have to spend 7 days to complete the journey. Shua, Shang Wei's figure flashed, and appeared in front of a majestic great city. The Four Seas Palace was not as simple as just a palace, but rather was a great city on the sea. It floated in the great ocean, as large as a star. How could a city possibly float on the ocean? It was not that the great city had been boosted by some kind of formations, and possessed the ability to stay afloat, but rather that there was a gigantic turtle below, bearing its weight. It was endlessly swimming in the ocean, and who knew how many epochs had passed. This great turtle had always been floating just like that on the surface of the ocean, and would eternally continue to float like this. The Four Seas Palace ruled over this great city, and the true location of their sect was in the core of this city. There was a chain of connected palaces, and they were all sea blue in color. Under the sunlight, they looked like rippling waves. Respects for the Imperial Empress. As Shang Wei passed, the people on the streets all paid their respects. Though attacking the Rock Palace had practically mobilized all the elites of the sect, there were still a great many servants and protective forces left behind to prevent their headquarters from being completely wiped out while they were off on their assault on the Rock Palace. When she arrived at the main palace, Shang Wei tossed out her hand, and Ling Han immediately enlarged, returning back to his original size. Tianyun's reincarnation, she said once more, but her tone was now extremely strict. Ling Han could only act shamelessly. Shaking his head, he said, "Hunyou is just Hunyou. She doesn't have much connection with Senior Tianyun." At present, he had 2 things he could fall back on. The first was Shang Wei's protective affections for him, and the second was the might of the Black Tower that could carry him off in flight away from this place. Small Tower was extremely confident that even a heavenly venerable tear could not possibly stop it from leaving. Of course, if he could settle matters peacefully, that was naturally best. Shang Wei looked at Ling Han steadily, supreme assertiveness on her beautiful face, seemingly wanting to intimidate Ling Han into giving in. Unfortunately, Ling Han was least scared of this. After a while, Shang Wei suddenly broke into a smile. "And Ran is about to come out of seclusion. You two should get to know each other first." If she wanted to capture Ling Han, it would naturally be a piece of cake for her, but unlocking the Tower of 3 Realms was another story. Furthermore, she also truly considered Ling Han as her own descendant, and did not want to force Ling Han into doing something that he did not wish to. Thus, she came up with a very good idea. Have Ling Han fall for Ran, and he naturally would forget about Tianyun's reincarnation, and obediently hand her over. Though Ling Han did not want to get to know that Ran, since Shang Wei did not speak about the matter of Hunyou, he naturally would not be reminding her. In any case, affections had to be mutual. If he stayed cool and indifferent on his side, how could Ran actually fall in love with him? 1. For the time being that was the plan. He nodded. "I'll do as you say, Aunt Wei." Shang Wei was very pleased. The affections of the previous generation had no outcome, and she was determined that they would be realized in this later generation. "Go on, you can walk around as you like in the palace and in the city." He could walk around wherever he liked in the palace and in the city, but another meaning to her words was that he could not leave the city. That was because Tianyun's reincarnation was still with him. Before he handed her over, Shang Wei would not let him leave no matter what. Ling Han excused himself, and exited the main hall. Then, he saw an elder dressed in black robes appear noiselessly. This elder bowed to him in greeting. "Young Master Ling, this old servant shall show you around first, and arrange accommodations for you as well." Chapter 2139. Holy Daughter and Ran. This black-robed elder's face was covered with wrinkles, and he looked to be in his 60s or 70s. His hair was completely white and his body slightly hunched, appearing old and decrepit. However, Ling Han did not dare to underestimate this old geezer in the slightest, because this old geezer's strength was unfathomable. He had definitely surpassed the dividing soul, and might be at the immortal palace tier or ascending origin tier. It should not be that he was a celestial king. There was no celestial king that would lower themselves to this extent. Furthermore, he was not wrapped by any strange lights either. This was a symbol of celestial king tier. Ling Han smiled. "Old sir, how do I address you?" "I would not dare. This old servant's surname is Chen, and I am a person who takes care of trivial matters in the palace." Young Master Ling can just address me as Manager Chen, the black-robed elder said, his attitude appearing incredibly humble. Manager Chen. Ling Han bowed. I have troubled you. No trouble, no trouble. Manager Chen chuckled. Please follow me. The old man walked ahead, while Ling Han followed behind him. As they walked, Manager Chen would give Ling Han a commentary about which place was which lord's abode. For example, the spiritual mountain celestial king and the others would naturally have a palace of their own, which was like a different world inside, and was incredibly colossal. All of a sudden, Ling Han's steps paused. He felt a menacing intent enshroud him, as if there was a supreme divine sword that was just about to stab a hole through him. This old servant pays respects to Holy Daughter and ran. Manager Chen bent his waist in respect in a certain direction, while his gaze roamed over Ling Han, showing a hint of surprise, seemingly stunned that Ling Han had actually been able to also discover something was off. Was it a coincidence? If it was not a coincidence, then this boy's awareness was really too sensitive. A red figure flashed, and a woman leaped out. She wore a bright red body-fitting suit, outlining her pride-worthy voluptuous figure on full display. Her beauty was also astonishingly exquisite. Though she was not as beautiful as the Empress in Hunyo, she was on par with Bewitching Maiden Ro, but her style was strikingly different. Bewitching Maiden Ro was captivatingly seductive, while this woman was fiery, just like a rose with thorns. This was Shang Jiwei's personal disciple. Her name was Anran, and she was also known as Holy Daughter Anran. Anran nodded slightly at Manager Chen. Though this person was not a celestial king, he was an old servant of the Four Seas Palace, and was deeply trusted by Shang Jiwei. Thus, she also gave him some face. Otherwise, who could garner a second glance from her if they were not a celestial king? She glanced at Ling Han again and calmly stated, "Get out immediately from the Four Seas City, and don't have any wild delusions." She was really overbearing, and did not care what Ling Han's own thoughts were at all. There was only one word that she wanted to say: scram. Ling Han chuckled and replied, "Sure, but I will have to trouble you to send me off." He indeed wanted to leave, but without handing Hunyo over, there was absolutely no way that Shang Jiwei would deliver him out of here. Thus, if Anran could send him out of the Four Seas City, Ling Han would naturally leave happily. Anran's eyes became harsh. Send you off? What was the meaning of that? Trying to get close to her? She humphed, "I'll give you 1 day's time, and if you are still staying in the city by this time tomorrow, then don't blame me for having no mercy." Having said that, she turned and left directly. Ling Han rubbed his nose. This woman was really overbearing. Who cares? Counter soldiers with arms, and water with an earth weir. Manager Chen approached and softly asked, "Young Master Ling, should the Imperial Empress step in?" This person was definitely one of Shang Jiwei's trusted aides. Would any ordinary person be qualified to have a direct audience with Shang Jiwei? And hearing his tone, it seemed that he could see her whenever he wanted to. This kind of royal favor was really strong. Ling Han shook his head. "It's fine. Just let her be." "Young Master Ling, you must not be careless. Holy Daughter Anran is a first secret monarch tier, and though you are also extremely talented, you are only at the dividing soul tier, after all," Manager Chen continued. "Wouldn't I still have the help of Manager Chen in that case?" Ling Han asked smilingly. He did not know what Manager Chen's cultivation level was, but he had an instinctive feeling that his strength definitely had to be stronger than Anran's, and much stronger at that. Manager Chen had not thought that Ling Han would reply like this, and involuntarily faltered before breaking into a smile. This brat was really interesting. He did not have the arrogance that other monarch tiers had at all, not considering every other being beneath himself like them. If it was Lin Xian, he would definitely talk tough and say that he would resolve the matter himself. However, if he really made that choice, he would only be seeking his own suffering. Of course, Manager Chen would definitely not just sit by and watch, but he would only interfere when Ling Han was in life-threatening danger. However, with these words from Ling Han, it was definitely impossible that he would delay so long before interfering. Ling Han was clearly a super monarch tier, but did not have the common ailment of stubborn pride. That was good. Since young Master Ling has already said this, I naturally would not be sitting by and watching, Manager Chen said with a slight smile. He gestured for them to continue on their way. Young Master Ling, please. Manager Chen, please. Led by Manager Chen, Ling Han toured all over the Four Seas Palace. As for Four Seas City, he could not do the same. That was because it was too large. If he were really to take a tour around there, it could not be done without a few days' time. After his tour, Manager Chen arranged accommodations for Ling Han. The matters for tomorrow should be left for tomorrow. Ling Han couldn't bother himself to think too hard, either. With a flash, his figure had already entered the Black Tower. Even if there was only one day, he had no wish to waste it, either. At present, he had already opened the upper limits to his cultivation level, and urgently wished to break through to Heaven's Soul, and after reaching Heaven's Soul, he would not need to go to any mystery realm. He would be able to rapidly condense his fifth divided soul, and aim for the true complete pinnacle of the dividing soul tier. Of course, he was presently still short of one source power of heaven and earth. Small tower, how awesome would it be to condense 9 divided souls? Ling Han asked. He was very curious about this aspect. Having 9 divided souls, just what kind of concept was that? Fifth severance could match Yang's soul, so wouldn't dividing 9 souls be capable of killing even fifth secrets? You are overthinking things, Small Tower scoffed. It had never been one to spare anyone with its words. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is too wide. Even if you condensed 8 divided souls, you could not possibly match immortal palace tier. Ling Han heard the hidden meaning in its words, which also means that dividing 9 souls would be able to match it? Finally, no longer so stupid, Small Tower said. Dividing 9 souls could match immortal palace tier, but that was only limited to the first secret of the immortal palace tier. Not only was the gap between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier extremely wide, the gap was wide as well between every minor level. I am only short of one source power of heaven and earth, Ling Han murmured. By now, he was not too far off from Heaven's Soul, and his need of 9 source powers of heaven and earth had also suddenly become urgent. Small Tower did not say anything further. Ling Han focused hard on cultivation inside the Black Tower, and Hunyo and the Empress were still attempting to collect the source power of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were rather unoccupied. It was naturally extremely dull to just continue cultivating. One day in the outside world would be 1,000 days inside the Black Tower. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, feeling a sliver of improvement in his cultivation level. Ling Han. Right at this moment, Ayn Rand's cold humph was heard from outside. Here she was. Ling Han walked out, and saw that Ayn Rand had come in without an invitation. She stood in the middle of the courtyard, and there was actually a young man beside her as well. He bore a modest smile on his face, but every movement was showing his arrogance, showing that his modest display was actually just an act. You haven't scrammed, Ayn Rand declared coldly, appearing extremely displeased. I'm waiting for you to send me off, Ling Han said smilingly. Cheeky mouth. Ayn Rand's beautiful eyes narrowed in a glare, and a terrifying pressure spread out like a tsunami. Ayn Rand, allow me. That young man stretched out his arm to hold her back, and his gaze turned on Ling Han, showing a strong contempt and dislike. Chapter 2140. Bet. This young man's name was Lin Xian. He was the spiritual mountain celestial king's disciple, and was outstandingly talented. At present, his cultivation level was at first secret of immortal palace tier, and his battle prowess had reached third secret of immortal palace tier. He was a noble, great monarch tier. This also filled him with brimming confidence, and he dared to court a prodigious woman like Ayn Rand. When he found out that Shang Jiwei had the intention to betroth Ayn Rand to Ling Han, he was naturally both furious and anxious. What right did Ling Han have? Lin Xian had courted Ayn Rand for so many years, and who in the entire Four Seas Palace did not know that? If Ling Han were to rob him of his woman, how would he be able to face others in the future? Moreover, it was very possible that Ayn Rand would inherit the position of Imperial Empress, which was also one of the reasons that he definitely could not give up. A brat that had popped out from who knew where actually dared to try and snatch his woman. He was seeking death. Of course, he only dared to just imagine killing Ling Han. This was a person that Shang Jiwei favored greatly. Otherwise, how could she want to marry Ayn Rand, whom she treated as her own daughter, to him? Thus, he did not dare do anything fatal to Ling Han at all, but just went along with Enran's thoughts on expelling Ling Han from Four Seas City. This naturally would be the best of both worlds. He would have won Enran's favor, and at the same time would not anger Shang Zai. Why expelling Ling Han was Enran's idea. Enran was disdainful of Ling Han, and hearing Lin Xian speak, she nodded. Ling Han was merely an earth soul, and should either herself or Lin Xian move, they would be able to deal with him in a couple of moves. You could have escaped unscathed, Lin Xian said. He strode forwards. But since you are so determined to seek your own humiliation, you can't blame anyone for it, either. Without waiting for Ling Han to answer at all, he stretched out his hand to grab out at Ling Han. Young Master Lin, please be lenient. A black figure flashed past, stepping in front of Ling Han, and allowing Lin Xian's palm strike to approach. When it landed on his body, Lin Xian's whole palm was embedded into his body. That was Manager Chen. Though Lin Xian's whole hand had sunk into his chest, he seemed to have not realized this fact at all. There was no change to his tone of voice, either. Ling Han had seen very clearly that Manager Chen's chest had turned into sand, and when this palm strike from Lin Xian landed, it had not hit anything solid, so it was naturally impossible that it would cause any kind of damage. This old geezer was definitely an ascending origin tier. A ninth heaven celestial king might not be able to lift someone else directly to the celestial king tier, but it should be no problem for the ascending origin tier. With how much Shang Ji trusted Manager Chen, even if he was just at first severance or second severance, she would still be able to forcefully boost his cultivation level to the ascending origin tier. Lin Xian frowned and asked, Elder Chen, why are you stopping me? There was a seventh heaven celestial king backing Lin Xian up, and he originally should not have to be so respectful towards an ascending origin tier, and could directly address him by name. However, the person backing Manager Chen was Shang Ji, and he was very much trusted by her. With this, Lin Xian could only be extremely polite. To say nothing of him, even if the spiritual mountain celestial king was here, he would at the very least not simply issue commands to Manager Chen. Manager Chen chuckled. Young Master Ling is an honored guest of our Four Seas Palace, and thus I have the duty of protecting our honored guest, so please forgive me, young Master Lin. Lin Xian was immediately speechless. The other party had used major principles to suppress him, so how was he supposed to refute? Now it is a personal matter between me and him. And Ran was not willing to give in. Elder Chen, please do not interfere. Young miss, please do not make things difficult for me either. Manager Chen showed a troubled expression. Naturally, it was impossible that Ran would cross over Manager Chen and make a move on Ling Han. Thus, she only looked at Ling Han, and said, when a man acts, he dares to take responsibility for his actions. To have another step up for you, do you not feel ashamed? Ling Han scratched his head, his expression simple and honest. You are an immortal palace tier, and I am only a dividing soul tier. How am I supposed to fight you? As long as you can parry a blow from me, I will temporarily allow you to stay here, Ran declared proudly. This naturally was not letting Ling Han off easy, but rather that she intended to seriously injure Ling Han with this strike, or even kill him. Afterwards, even if she would be reprimanded by Shang Ji, the latter would have nothing to say. In any case, with how much Ran was doted on, worse came to worst, she would be pelted with a harsh scolding, but for her to resign herself and marry Ling Han was an absolute impossibility. One strike. Ling Han hurriedly pretended to shake his head. The gap between the dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier is really too wide. To say nothing that you are a first secret monarch tier, even if you were an ordinary first secret, I would still be killed by one strike from you. This brat was not stupid, Lin Xian thought from the sidelines. Unfortunately, he was really too greedy, or he should have known that Ran was definitely someone way beyond his station. The difference in strength between the immortal palace tier and dividing soul tier was like the difference between heaven and earth, and that was the same for their status. Perhaps Ling Han would only be capable of remaining in the dividing soul tier for his whole life? But Ran would at least be capable of becoming a fifth heaven celestial king, or could possibly even inherit Shang Jiwei's legacy, and become the strongest ninth heaven celestial king in the celestial realm. Lin Xian did not know that there was still the heavenly venerable tier above ninth heaven celestial king tier. Only a very limited number of people knew this kind of secret. Even if you are outmatched, I still won't kill you, Ran said deliberately. Her aim was to coerce Ling Han into agreeing. Are you even a man? Ling Han purposely displayed an expression of anger. Who says I am not a man? Then come and parry a strike from me. Fine. It seemed like Ling Han could no longer tolerate being spurred on, and agreed. Lin Xian immediately showed a disdainful expression. What an idiot, to completely lose his wits just with a few words. This kind of person was not worthy of his serious regard at all. He just had to scheme a little, and he would be able to easily get him killed. Meanwhile, Manager Chen was shocked. With how Ling Han had behaved yesterday, he was clearly a calm, steady person. How could he have been so easily angered? There was something off. However, Ling Han dragged out the word. I am no idiot. Why should I allow you to hit me when there is no benefit? Unless you agree that if I can parry a strike from you, you will give me a few celestial medicines. A few celestial medicines? Brat, you are really demanding an exorbitant price. Who do you think you are? Taking a hit, and that is worth a few celestial medicines? No problem. And Ran agreed without the slightest hesitation. She was naturally being so straightforward because her killing intent was already spurred. She intended to kill Ling Han. Thus, no matter what kind of harsh conditions the latter demanded, so what? Ling Han was not so easily dismissed. He stretched out his hand. Then we'll make this bet. Take out the stakes of the bet. I fear you would renege on the bet. Do you think I would renege on our bet? And Ran was infuriated. She was the holy daughter of the Four Seas Palace and also the most favored disciple of Shang Jiwei. Her word was as good as gold, so how could she possibly break her word? In any case, if you don't take out the celestial medicines, I am not going to play. Ling Han's attitude was determined. Fine. And Ran finally nodded. Spreading open her right hand, 3 celestial medicines lay in her palm. 7 million years, 30 million years plus, and 200 billion 50 million years. Ling Han swept a glance over, and couldn't help but shake his head continuously. I say, do you think you are fooling a beggar here? Celestial medicines of this age cannot even be considered preliminary quality. And Ran was involuntarily surprised. She had not thought that Ling Han's eyes were so sharp. He had just swept an eye over them, and he had completely clearly distinguished the age of the 3 celestial medicines. She gave Ling Han a second look, a feeling of alertness rising up in her heart. It can't be that this brat is a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? But upon further thought, she shook her head inwardly. No matter what, there was absolutely no way that a dividing soul tier could match an immortal palace tier, even if it was just parrying a strike. Moreover, she was a first secret monarch tier, her battle prowess directly soaring to the height of 3rd secret. No matter how heaven-defying Ling Han was, it was useless. He would definitely be killed instantly with a strike. With another wave of her hand, 3 new celestial medicines appeared in her hand. Chapter 2141. Tricked. Only then did Ling Han break into a smile. Finally, we have some sincerity. All right, I will take a blow from you. He first took over the celestial medicines from Enran's hands. If she refused, he would not begin the bet, either, so Enran could only give in. However, Enran was not concerned, either. In any case, once Ling Han died, she would be able to take back whatever she gave out. Are you done? Enran asked impatiently. She had never accommodated someone so much before. Even if there hadn't been the previous matter of betrothal, she would have felt an impulse to kill Ling Han. Sure, of course, Ling Han replied, laughing. Young Master Ling. Manager Chen spoke up. He knew Enran very well. She was definitely not betting with Ling Han for fun, but was rather going to take Ling Han's life without the slightest hesitation. Otherwise, she would not have been Enran. Thus, Manager Chen wanted to advise Ling Han not to do so. At a critical moment, he would even use brute force to forcibly take the other away and leave. Ling Han was a person that Shang Jiwei had deliberately instructed that he had to take good care of, and no harm could be allowed to come to him. It's fine. Ling Han winked at Manager Chen. Manager Chen was inwardly surprised. In his impression, Ling Han was definitely not the type that would be so greedy to the point of risking his own life. What more when this was no longer a risk he was taking, but rather committing suicide? Why had Ling Han agreed to the battle? Could it be that he had some kind of special technique to deal with an immortal palace tier? Hesitating, Manager Chen took a step back and made no further attempt to stop them. Ran moved. Boom, her slender hands spread open, her fingers like mountains that enveloped Ling Han. Wang, Ling Han's figure trembled. The whole 30,000 meters of surrounding space warped to become multiple mirrors, and an image of Ling Han was placed in every single mirror. This. Ran couldn't help but falter. Which of them was Ling Han's true self? This move had indeed exceeded her expectations. Ling Han had actually grasped regulations of space, and was actually so skilled at them. Boom, the attack surged past, and the space mirrors shattered one after another. The Ling Hans within them were also naturally shattered by the impact, but there were still around 1/3 of space mirrors that were unscathed. As long as there was still one spiritual void manifestation, Ling Han's true self could freely switch with it. Thus, this blow naturally did not cause the slightest bit of damage to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled. "Thank you for the business, please see yourself out." "You." Ran was first taken aback, and then flew into an abrupt fury. She naturally knew that she had fallen for Ling Han's trick. This brat was really a wolf in sheep's clothing. He had obviously grasped the regulations of space, and possessed a very strong survival ability, yet pretended to use all sorts of excuses, purposely inciting her to take out celestial medicines to use as stakes for their bet. Too devious. Too cunning. Was this still a man? Meanwhile, Manager Chen was stroking his beard and smiling slightly. So it turned out that Ling Han had this kind of ability. No wonder he dared to accept such a bet. Ran glared at Ling Han for a while, and then said, "Take another blow from me." Didn't you just say that I only have to take one blow?" Ling Han feigned shock. Ran was indeed overbearing, but she was also proud at the same time. Hearing Ling Han's words, her face involuntarily reddened. With her status, she should not have made a move on a dividing soul tier, and now making a move once was not enough, and she actually wanted to do it a second time. This was too embarrassing. "Do you dare take another blow from me?" She could only continue to spur him on like this. Ling Han extended his hand, and then crooked a finger. "Take out another 3 celestial medicines, and they all have to be over 1 billion years in age. If the celestial medicine was over 1 billion years old, then even a dividing soul tier could use them. Of course, if it was 10 billion years or 100 billion years and above, that would definitely be even better." Ran thought for a while. She had already seen this move from Ling Han, so it was definitely impossible that she would be deceived again. Fine, again. She took out another 3 celestial medicines, and they were all over 1 billion years in age. Only someone like her, a disciple of a 9th heaven celestial king, would be that wealthy. Ling Han accepted them happily, smiling widely and stated, "Come on then." Ran moved again. This time, she had directly used a celestial technique. A desolate aura surged out. It was as if she had become a great beast that originated from the ancient era. She only had to move slightly, and she would be capable of even shattering the heaven and earth. Having fallen for Ling Han's trick once, she set aside all her previous contempt, and considered Ling Han as a real opponent. Boom, she sent out a punch. Instantly, the space was ripped apart, and the force endlessly spread out in all directions. In an instant, it had covered an area of 30,000 meters, and was still spreading out continuously. Ling Han did not use the power of space, but rather took this blow head-on. Boom, the strike immediately landed solidly on him, and his figure was sent flying like he was a cannonball. However, Ran, Manager Chen, and Lin Xian all showed expressions of shock at the same time. That was because though Ling Han had been sent flying, his body was completely undamaged. How was this possible? Taking such a terrifying blow, Ling Han should logically have been turned into pieces. How was it possible that he was practically unharmed? There were indeed some traces of blood at the corners of his lips, but this kind of injury was completely negligible. He was still who knew how far off from actual death. With a bang, Ling Han crashed heavily into a stone pillar, and his body was immediately stopped. Then he slid back down, but before his body had landed completely on the ground, he had already stood up by himself. He had taken another blow, and he had done so with great ease. This was because he had directly channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and for a short time, his defenses would be boosted to a terrifying extent. he would be able to easily take on even the full force blow of a first secret monarch tier. And Ran and the others were gaping widely, still in a state of deep shock and astonishment. Previously, though Ling Han had also parried a strike from Ran, it had been due to a stroke of cleverness, and he had not confronted Ran directly. However, it was completely different this time round. Ling Han had sustained a blow head-on, and it was a blow with full force from Ran at that. Awesome to the extreme. With this strike, there was nothing Ran could say or complain about. However, she became even more infuriated. You obviously had that kind of strength, but why had you not used it during the first time? This guy was clearly wanting to scam her for her celestial medicines. Realization suddenly dawned on her. This guy that looked to be slightly dumb was instead a prodigy. He had deliberately lured her into the trap, tricking her twice for her celestial medicines. Had she ever been tricked before? There was definitely no such instance. Firstly, no one would dare, and secondly, with her prodigious genius, who could successfully trick her? Yet now, one such person had appeared. He had not only tricked her, he had done it twice. And Ran was angered to the point of madness. However, she had no choice but to be impressed by Ling Han's strength. This guy was really outrageously bold, and he did indeed have heaven-defying techniques. Even she had to admit that she was impressed. Good. She said the word 3 times. Even if she was angered to the point of wanting to commit murder, she could not bring herself to make another move on Ling Han. If she were to move on a dividing soul tier 3 times consecutively, her pride would not allow that. She turned and left. At least for the moment, she could not possibly come again to deal with Ling Han. Meanwhile, Lin Xian looked longer at Ling Han before turning around and leaving as well. He had already tagged Ling Han as a powerful enemy that he had to get rid of. His display was too heaven-defying. If he broke through again to the Immortal Palace tier, then wouldn't he be completely unmatched? Young Master Ling, very well done. Manager Chen said, smiling widely, and even gave Ling Han a thumbs up. Ling Han smiled slightly. Manager Chen is too polite. This junior just has thick skin and coarse flesh. Manager Chen only smiled in response. Ling Han was both brave and smart. It was nothing as simple as just having heaven-defying defenses. Furthermore, he dared to even trick Holy Daughter and Ran. In the Four Seas Palace, this was definitely the first time it happened. Chapter 2142. Reaching Heaven's Soul quietly. Ling Han settled down in the Four Seas Palace. Every day, he would be studying Great Tao, and at the same time would also be concocting alchemical pills. Shang Wei had very good patience. She had been alive for who knew how many epochs, so she naturally did not mind waiting 8 to 10 years, or even several 100 billion years. She would have this kind of patience naturally because she took Ling Han as her own son/nephew. Otherwise, she would have just killed him and been done with it. However, it was also not realistic for Ling Han to leave Four Seas City. Shang Wei would definitely not allow him to leave before he handed over Hu Niu. Thus, he could only cultivate and improve his skill in alchemy. In the blink of an eye, 7 years had already passed. 7 years had passed in the outside world, and with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, as long as 7,000 years had passed, and the time spent comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree was even more overwhelmingly long, and added with how Shang Wei doted on him, she would deliver all kind of precious cultivation resources to him, causing his cultivation level to soar all the way to the pinnacle of Earth Soul. Ling Han estimated that if he had not had Shang Wei's support, he would only have been able to reach this level in over 1,000 years. Even the Black Tower was not omnipotent. From this, it was also clear that Shang Wei was really treating him like her own son, which also caused Ling Han a headache. In the future, if Hu Niu were to become enemies with Shang Wei, he would definitely be on Hu Niu's side, but if he was to step in to deal with Shang Wei, that would be really too ungrateful. Whatever, he'd put the matter aside for now. The Rock Palace possessed Yang Soul Ocean, Earth Soul Mountain, and the sort, so considering the Four Seas Palace was its equal, would they also have this kind of mystery realm? Of course they would. Thus, when Ling Han reached peak stage Earth Soul, he went to the Heaven Soul Pool to break through. Merely a month later, he had reached consummate level, and successfully advanced to Heaven Soul tier, catching up with Hu Niu, the Empress, and the others in cultivation level. And another piece of good news came. The Empress and Hunyo had subdued the source power of heaven and earth at about the same time. They managed to succeed firstly because their own natural talent in cultivation was extremely high, and they were qualified to subdue source powers of heaven and earth, and secondly because the Black Dragon King had used a secret technique to weaken the resistance of the source power of heaven and earth, thus allowing the two women to succeed easily. Otherwise, even a celestial king would need tens of millions of years to collect a source power of heaven and earth. Even with the time acceleration effects of the Black Tower, the two women had only spent more than 10,000 years. Ling Han. Hunyo pounced into Ling Han's arms, greedily sniffing the scent that belonged solely to him. Nyo missed you to death. No slight distraction could take place when collecting a source power of heaven and earth. Otherwise, not only would all previous efforts be completely wasted, the source power of heaven and earth would also abandon you and leave. This was always only a one-time opportunity. Thus, Hunyo could only suppress her nature earlier. For her, this was really not very easily done. Ling Han laughed loudly, and spun around 3 times where he stood while hugging Hunyo. The Empress also pounced. She looked down proudly on the world, and would directly express any fondness she felt. She would not pay any regard to the thoughts of others. Ling Han also embraced the Empress, and felt as if embracing these two women in his arms was like embracing the whole world, and his heart also became incredibly steadfast. He would definitely safeguard this happiness. Nyo is going out to play. Hunyo acted spoiled in Ling Han's arms for a while, and then couldn't help but call out. She had a playful nature, and she had been in seclusion for over 10,000 years continuously this time. She naturally felt suffocated. Ling Han's expression changed lightly. Shaking his head, he said, "Nyo, you won't be able to leave here for the moment." "Why?" Hunyo's expression was filled with curiosity. Ling Han sighed, and after slight hesitation, he told her the truth about how the Rock Palace had already been destroyed by the Four Seas Palace. "Wah, that despicable old witch, Nyo will kill her." After Hunyo heard this, she was immediately howling in anger. Indeed, she had not liked how long Yuexi would interfere in all her matters, but after so many years, she had naturally developed very strong affections for Long Yuexi, just like how a mischievous granddaughter would feel towards her grandmother. She was not so concerned about the destruction of the Rock Palace, but Long Yuexi's death still made her extremely furious. She wanted to leap out of the Black Tower and seek out Shangji Wei for vengeance. Ling Han naturally would not agree. The other party was just worrying if Hunyo was going to appear. Going out would really mean just delivering herself to her doorstep. He continuously comforted and eased her anxiety. The Empress also put aside their old grudges, and gave Hunyo a few words of advice, and added with Bewitching Maiden Ro and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden who had come later, the 4 of them finally managed to temporarily convince Hunyo. Nyo is going to cultivate. Nyo is going to become a heavenly venerable tier, then beat up that old witch. Hunyo declared, her eyes red. This little girl had never liked cultivation, but now she was actually announcing such a declaration, which showed how sorrowful and furious she was. Ling Han nodded. If Hunyo could focus her grief on cultivation, that would be good. But hopefully, this matter would not have any effects on the little girl's personality, and turn an originally optimistic person into a tool that only knew revenge. He exited the Black Tower, and went into a daze. 7 years had passed, and though Shangji Wei had still not forced him before, he had not found any means of leaving at all. It was like he would only be able to escape and leave when he advanced to Celestial King tier, and was qualified to match Shangji Wei in speed. What was he going to do? If Hunyo could not leave the Black Tower, then it would be forever impossible for her to break through to the Immortal Palace tier. How could that be allowed? Pang pang pang. Just as he was feeling troubled, a knock sounded at the doors. There had been countless people who had visited him throughout these 7 years. She was presently the most important person in Shangji Wei's eyes. Everyone wanted to develop amicable relations with him. However, he had been constantly cultivating in seclusion, so others could only be left out in the cold. And now, here was a visitor. Ling Han naturally would not be surprised. He had initially wanted to enter into the Black Tower, but thinking that since he was presently stuck in a dilemma anyways, he might as well find someone he could chat with, and find distraction from his troubles. He went to open the doors, and saw a young man standing in the doorway. When he saw Ling Han, he immediately clasped his hands in greeting, and said, My name is Fu He, and I am Lord Lin Xian's follower. Greetings, young Master Ling. One of Lin Xian's men. Ling Han naturally did not bear any positive feelings for Lin Xian, but as the saying went, one would not hit someone who smiled at you. He could not bother himself to show his displeasure to just one of his underlings, either. Thus he smiled and asked, "What is it?" "It's like this. A mystery realm has been newly discovered in the wide change heaven, attracting a great many prodigies and elites to adventure there. Lord Lin Xian and Lady Ran have both decided to journey there." Fu He showed a very humble attitude. "Lord Lin Xian has commanded me to come and ask if young Master Ling would be interested to go with them." Of course he was, but how could Shangji Wei actually release him? Moreover, would Lin Xian really be that kind? He was probably planning on making a move on him in the mystery realm. Ling Han smiled slightly. "If Lin Xian can convince Aunt Wei, I would indeed like to take a look. The spiritual mountain celestial king still has some influence on the Lady Imperial Empress. Since young Master Ling wishes to go, then Lord Lin Xian would naturally ask the spiritual mountain celestial king to step out and put the suggestion forward to Lady Imperial Empress," Fu He said. Ling Han was surprised. As a great, noble celestial king, one that was at seventh heaven at that, he would actually be willing to deliberately make a trip for the sake of a minor dividing soul tier like him. It looked like the spiritual mountain celestial king was very meticulous when it came to the matters of his disciple as well if he would actually come out in the open and create a chance for his disciple to kill him. However, if they were really able to leave the Four Seas Palace, Ling Han would really like to grab this opportunity. He had the Black Tower, and this should only be known to Shangji Wei. Even the spiritual mountain celestial king did not know about the karmic life heavenly venerable. The matter actually progressed extraordinarily smoothly. A mere 3 days later, Manager Chen passed on a message from Shangji Wei that he was to decide for himself whether to go to this mystery realm or not, and if he was going, there would be many dangers in the mystery realm, so he had to be extremely cautious. Chapter 2143. Another familiar person. Naturally, Ling Han chose to go. Thus, when Manager Chen brought the message back from Ling Han, Shangji Wei deliberately summoned both him and Ran. She did not speak of the matter of Hunyo at all, and merely reminded them to be especially careful, as benevolent as a mother. This caused Ran to clench her fists in anger. Initially, this had been concern and love that she enjoyed alone, yet now she had to share it with Ling Han, which made it very hard for her to accept. "Fine, you have snatched what belongs to me, and I will definitely make you suffer after we enter into the mystery realm," she internally swore. And Ran. Shangji Wei suddenly looked towards her. "Master." And Ran hurriedly half-knelt. "I'll entrust Ling Han to you. You must not let any harm come to him," Shangji Wei said sternly. How could she be ignorant of this disciple's personality? Thus, she directly gave her forewarning. "Ah!" And Ran's mouth gaped half open. With her personality, if she were to agree, it would be absolutely impossible that she wouldn't keep her promise. Otherwise, how would she be able to call Shangji Wei her master again? However, to ask her to tolerate Ling Han for the whole journey, and have to guarantee his safety at the same time, how could she accept that? Shangji Wei's slender brows furrowed in a slight frown. "Yes, master." And Ran nodded reluctantly. Only now did Shangji Wei break into a smile. She glanced at Ling Han, then turned to look at Ran, and felt that this was really a match made in heaven, causing her to involuntarily recall how she and the karmic life heavenly venerable would have been in their youth, if that be *TCH, Tianyun had not appeared. Involuntarily, her killing intent blazed. Boom! Multiple depressions appeared in the palace. A storm surged out from the void, but was immediately sliced to pieces by her killing intent. When a ninth heaven celestial king raged, even the heaven and earth would be moved. "Go on." She waved them off. Ling Han and Ran quickly left, firstly because they both had thoughts on their minds, and secondly because a ninth heaven celestial king was angered, and the pressure was too heavy to stay beside her. After some slight preparations, Ling Han and the rest then set out. This time, it was the spiritual mountain celestial king leading them. It was just a few juniors going off to adventure in a mystery realm, so why was there any need to mobilize a seventh heaven celestial king? This naturally was due to Shangji Wei's high regard. Whether it was Ran or Ling Han, She considered them both as her own children, and naturally would not allow anything bad to happen to either of them. However, there had initially been no need for the spiritual mountain celestial king to step out for this matter personally, yet he took the initiative to take this job, so it was naturally impossible that Xiao Gu would refuse. Thus, the spiritual mountain celestial king scooped up the three young people, and directly tore a rip into space, setting out towards the wide change heaven. A mere 5 days later he stopped. They had already arrived at the wide change heaven. The spiritual mountain celestial king's figure slowed, and slowly advanced with the three juniors. However, celestial kings had heaven-defying power. Ling Han was obviously just using normal speed to travel, yet he still did not fall back behind Ran and Lin Xian, far surpassing the speed that he could reach. In truth, Lin Xian and Ran's speed was also faster than their usual rate. This was because the spiritual mountain celestial king had boosted them with a certain celestial technique, yet they did not feel anything at all, as if this was very normal. In this way, they had only spent another day to arrive at the location of that mystery realm. Ling Han's expression became strange because he knew this place. It was not that he had been here before, but rather that he had seen it on a map. After he had won the first place in the alchemy tournament, the prize was an ancient map, and it was said that there was a several hundred billion years old celestial medicine, hidden in the location where the hidden treasure was shown on the map, and it was within this mystery realm. What a coincidence! This mystery realm had only appeared not too long ago. Initially, this had been a sea, but in the last few years, the sea waters rapidly evaporated, revealing a gigantic pit. Then, the pit cracked apart, revealing another world. Ling Han deliberately swept a glance over the ancient map, and discovered that there should have been a transference portal that could allow entry, but some unknown change had taken place, causing the sea waters to evaporate, and the mystery realm to reveal itself. In the skies, multiple figures streaked past, flying into the mystery realm. Ling Han looked down from his lofty position, and saw that incredibly tall trees spread as far as the eye could see. They were several thousand meters tall, and the tree leaves were thick and wide, considerably larger than even the average house. And the roars of tigers and howls of wolves could vaguely be heard from beneath them. There were also birds flying out from within. Some directly flew far away, while others would fly in a circle, and then return into the mystery realm. This is a place that has been lost since the ancient age. The spiritual mountain celestial king's eyes closed slightly, his right hand making a divination beneath his sleeve. A while later, his eyes snapped open, showing an expression of surprise. The celestial realm had existed for who knew how many epochs, but people universally called what was 10 epochs ago the ancient age, and what was 100 epochs ago would be called the primitive age. Though the spiritual mountain celestial king had attained Tao many years ago, he had only been alive for over 2 epochs, and compared to the celestial realm, that was naturally negligible. It was said that a super great war had erupted before both in the ancient age and primitive age, and a great many celestial kings had died, even 9th heaven celestial kings. Thus, when something was connected with the ancient age, even he, a 7th heaven celestial king, would be tempted. Who knew, there might be a treasure that had been left after the death of a 9th heaven celestial king that would lend him a helping hand, and help him to break through to 8th heaven. Brother spiritual mountain. A cry rang out, and a man with a thin lanky build flew down towards them. Brother great clouds. When the spiritual mountain celestial king saw him, he offered him a smile, and even nodded in response. This thin man's body was wrapped with 8-colored celestial light, showing that he was an 8th heaven celestial king. Why would an 8th heaven celestial king be willing to treat the spiritual mountain celestial king as an equal? Naturally, it was because the spiritual mountain celestial king's battle prowess was too strong, and there was a place for him even among 8th heaven celestial kings. The great cloud celestial king waved a hand, and 5 young people instantly appeared by his side. These were the juniors that he had brought along with him using a celestial technique. Ling Han. One of the juniors spotted Ling Han, and uncontrollably called out. Ling Han naturally spotted him as well, and a rueful feeling involuntarily rose up in him. This world was actually quite small. Yulan Fenghua, the holy son of the Imperial Void sect. Going by that account, this great cloud celestial king should be a member of the Imperial Void sect then. So it is Brother Yulan, Ling Han replied with a smile. Meanwhile, Yulan Fenghua's expression was filled with shock. Previously, he had battled Ling Han, and the outcome was a tie, but Ling Han's cultivation level was lower than his by a minor level, causing his menacing killing intent to rise. He had deliberately chatted with the other party just to probe into Ling Han's background. He could confirm that Ling Han was just a lone cultivator, albeit one with heaven-defying good luck, and that was why he would have been so accomplished in cultivation. Thus, he extended an invitation to Ling Han, inviting him to the Imperial Void Sect. There, he would be able to play Ling Han easily to death. But now he had actually seen Ling Han again, and the latter was actually with the members of the Four Seas Palace. He was a member of the Four Seas Palace. He had never heard about someone like him in the Four Seas Palace. Who is this little boy, to actually be acquainted with our holy son Yulan? The great cloud celestial king swept over him, and deliberately voiced the question. That was because he was very familiar with Yulan Fenghua, and he had never seen the latter look so stunned. At least in front of a peer of equal cultivation levels, both Ling Han and Yulan Fenghua were heaven souls. Just a mere junior. The spiritual mountain celestial king sketched over the details. If Ling Han had a grudge with the Imperial Void Sect, he would not mind using them to get Ling Han killed. Thus, it was naturally impossible that he would reveal the relationship between Ling Han and Xiao Gu. And Ran was presently angry, so she naturally would not help Ling Han explain, and it was even more so for Lin Xian. Chapter 2144. Insect Sting. I had never thought that this place was actually a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king spoke the same words as the spiritual mountain celestial king. This eight-truth spiritual beast should have long since gone extinct, right? I never imagined that I would be able to see it again here. He extended a hand carelessly, and as origin power surged, a massive beast was instantly grabbed by a colossal eight-colored hand. No matter how hard it struggled, it was all wasted effort, and when it had been dragged in front of these two celestial kings, it was so scared that its tail was tightly clamped between its legs. In front of this kind of high-level celestial king, no matter how untamable and wild it would still instinctively feel fear. A celestial king represented the heaven and earth. Indeed, these 8 celestial patterns have been infused with 8 kinds of regulations of heaven and earth. The spiritual mountain celestial king waved a hand, and an extremely complex seal immediately appeared on that massive beast. Though the original 8-truth spiritual beast has not advanced into 9th heaven, with these 8 celestial patterns, it still practically conquered all its peers of 8th heaven. Ling Han heard this, and then sensed for himself. Involuntarily, he nodded inwardly. At present, he possessed 8 source powers of heaven and earth, but these 8 regulations were the closest to their source, so he was also most sensitive towards these 8 regulations. He could sense that there were 5 regulations on that seal that could resonate with him. Once the 8-truth spiritual beast advanced into severing mundane tier, it would grasp 8 regulations, so its battle prowess was definitely incredibly strong, and it would be a cinch for it to suppress all its peers. Initially, I had only made this trip on a spontaneous impulse due to extreme boredom, but I never thought that I would discover a lost land from the ancient age. The great cloud celestial king casually tossed the 8-truth spiritual beast away, and this giant beast hurriedly broke into a run and fled. It was practically scared out of its wits. Who knows what great fortune there would be, the spiritual mountain celestial king stated calmly, but there was a dominance in his tone that spoke of willingness to battle the heaven and earth itself. This was a way of expression and also a kind of confidence. Even if the other was an 8th heaven celestial king, he would not give in to him or fear him. Let the juniors go for their adventure while we take a walk, all right? The great cloud celestial king asked, smiling. Sure. The spiritual mountain celestial king immediately accepted. With him and the great cloud celestial king, how would Ling Han and the rest be able to die? With a wave of his hand, the great cloud celestial king sent the 5 juniors by his side into the mystery realm, and the spiritual mountain celestial king also waved his hand, and delivered Ling Han and the others inside. They were practically right next to Yulan Fenghua and his group. The 2 celestial kings laughed, and strode off. Their target was a tall peak that pierced through the clouds in the distance. There were divine clouds immersing the skies, and possessed a primitive air. Ling Han understood inwardly. The reason that the spiritual mountain celestial king had escorted them here was not just to ensure the safety of their group, but also for the purpose of monitoring him, naturally for Hunyo's sake. How could Xiao Gu possibly let him go so easily? And now that the spiritual mountain celestial king had left, both Ran and Lin Xian should be taking over this duty then. In fact, the spiritual mountain celestial king still had a sliver of thought following him. Hunyo only had to appear, and this thread of thought would immediately take form and capture Hunyo. Even a thread of thought from a celestial king could suppress ascending origin tier, and this was an unquestionable fact. Ling Han still could not let Hunyo out now, and had to find a chance to flee. He had no intention of returning to Four Seas City. Holy Daughter and Ran, Brother Lin Xian, Yulan Fenghua and the others all greeted Ran and Lin Xian. Previously, all of them appeared slightly reserved in the presence of celestial kings. Among these 5 of them, aside from Yulan Fenghua who was still a heaven soul, the other 4 had all advanced into the immortal palace tier, and were the other holy sons and holy daughter of the imperial void sect. However, 4 of these were men, with only one that was a woman. Lin Xian and Ran clearly knew them, and greeted them back. This is. The man named Ai Kai Feng looked towards Ling Han, and showed an expression of ponderment. Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. Ai Kai Feng responded with a reserved smile, though a hint of disdain was revealed in the corners of his lips. He was a first secret monarch tier, while the other was only a heavenly emperor. The gap in strength between the 2 of them was like the gap between heaven and earth, so he naturally disdained even talking to Ling Han. This would degrade his own status. He was not the only one, for the other 3 were the same. Their names were Lao Liang, Bi Ziwen, and Di Tongxin, respectively. They merely conversed cordially with Lin Xian and Ran, but did not cast a second look at Ling Han. The truth was the fact that they even bothered to ask Ling Han's name was already giving him enough credit. Neither Ran nor Lin Xian had the intention to explain who Ling Han was. The 8 of them set out, and began walking in the forest. They were not celestial kings, so how could they possibly dare to act rash in this land from the ancient age, and fly in the air without restraint? This dense forest was very dark, and the great trees were several thousand meters tall, with large, dense, thick leaves that blocked all light. Thankfully, they were all at the dividing soul tier at the very least, so this was naturally not much of a problem. Aya! Bi Ziwen suddenly exclaimed, and stopped walking. What is it? Lao Liang asked. Bi Ziwen raised his leg, and saw that blood was actually dripping from his foot. Everyone was stunned. Though they had not encountered enemies yet, having come to such a place, who would dare be careless? They would all definitely have covered their bodies with origin power, but Bi Ziwen had actually bled for no reason, which both confused and shocked them. What's going on? Bi Ziwen removed his sock and shoe, and saw that there was actually an insect sting stabbing into the sole of his left foot, exuding an eerily blue luster. It was just an insect sting, and had not been actively used. Bi Ziwen had only stepped on it, and it had actually pierced through his shoe and sock, and penetrated his defense of origin power and regulations, stabbing into the sole of foot. 222. Bi Ziwen's body suddenly trembled, as if he was in a sudden seizure. His eyes rolled upwards, and there was white foam gushing from the corners of his lips. Oh no, this insect sting is poisonous. With who they all were, they immediately guessed the reason. This was too terrifying, wasn't it? A great, noble immortal palace tier elite actually could not block an insect sting that had been broken off, and the strong poison had entered his body, further causing a monarch tier like Bi Ziwen to be unable to resist it at all. Lao Liang and the others quickly took out antidote alchemical pills, and forced them into Bi Ziwen. Not long after, Bi Ziwen finally calmed down, but he had also passed out, releasing very deep breathing sounds. At the very least, they had finally suppressed the poison. As expected of a lost land from the ancient age, where there is danger at every step, Ai Kai Feng felt lingering fear. He, Lao Liang, and Di Tongxin were all first secret monarch tiers like Bi Ziwen. Since Bi Ziwen had been struck, then they definitely could not be spared, either. However, they were luckier, and had not stepped on that broken insect sting. But who knew if there would be other insect stings or something similar in this place? Meanwhile, Ling Han glanced at Bi Ziwen, and stated, "There is something off with his condition. It does not seem like the poison has been dispelled." "What do you know?" Ai Kai Feng immediately retorted. He had just spoken, and Ling Han replied like this. Wasn't that just purposely undermining him? The highest change antidote pill senior brother be ingested had been personally concocted by the 4-star Grandmaster Xueqi, capable of easily curing all poisons beneath Celestial King tier. And both Lao Liang and Di Tongxin nodded in unison. They naturally were absolutely trusting and reassured about Grandmaster Zhong Qi. Ling Han's mouth twitched, and he did not speak any further. He was also a 4-star Grandmaster, all right? But since these three people did not appreciate his kindness, there was no need for him to be snubbed despite his good intentions. In any case, he was not very close with Besieged either, nor did they have any kind of relations, so what business was it of his whether the other man lived or died? Besieged suddenly opened his mouth and released a strange sound. It sounded like it had been forced out from a dead tree. When everyone's attention was drawn to him, Besieged's eyes suddenly snapped open. The whites of his eyes had become blue, while his pupils had become deathly pale, looking horrifyingly eerie. Chapter 2145. Corroded Corpse. The poison has really not been cured. Lin Xian deliberately laughed. Ling Han was right. Hearing these words from him, AI Kai Feng and their group were naturally very displeased about him, but more of their antagonism was directed at Ling Han. Well, it was he that had indeed spoken such words. Naturally, the four of them thought that he was the villain. Ling Han glanced at Lin Xian. This man was really a poisonous being. This was a move to deliberately draw animosity towards him. Besieged was moaning louder and louder, and then suddenly jumped to his feet in a bounce. His posture was extremely weird, his legs not bending, and he was just standing there as erect as a wooden stick. A spine-chilling aura exuded from those eerily pale eyes. His gaze was focused on Lao Liang, and he suddenly pounced over, opening his mouth and directing a bite at the latter's throat. "Brother B, have you gone mad?" Lao Liang hurriedly retreated. It was as if Besieged had indeed gone mad, his mouth releasing groans that could not be heard clearly as he continued to bite fiercely at Lao Liang. The poison in Senior Brother B's body has not been dispersed. It would be useless to try convincing him. We have to capture him. AI Kai Feng called out, and was the first to make his move. Lao Liang and Di Tongxin also moved quickly, suppressing Besieged together, while Yulan Fenghua was only standing on the sidelines and watching the show. Though he was esteemed as the strongest holy son in the history of Imperial Void Sect, limited by his cultivation level, this was above his pay grade. The three moved together and attacked Besieged in unison. However, their cultivation levels and strength were close and similar with Besieged, so how could it be any easy matter to capture the latter? The present Besieged did not have any consciousness at all, and was only aware of opening his mouth and biting others. He did not recognize anyone, and had no scruples, but AI Kai Feng and the others did not dare attack him too severely. In this manner, even if they had an advantage in numbers, the advantage would be cancelled out. "Brother Lin Xian, Holy Daughter and Ran, please help us." Di Tongxin requested assistance. Lin Xian looked towards Ran, and the latter nodded. The two of them immediately moved, joining the battle. They were much less reserved in their attacks. So what if they wounded Besieged severely? He could slowly recuperate after this. AI Kai Feng and their group could not attack conveniently, and thus did not stop Ran and Lin Xian. On the contrary, they were responsible for restraining Besieged's attacks so that Ran and Lin Xian could go all out and attack freely. Ling Han was bored and watched the show, his arms crossed over his chest. I had never really thought that Brother Ling would actually be a member of the Four Seas Palace. Yulan Fenghua walked over, shaking his head, and bringing a hint of rebuke in his expression. "Brother Ling, you are really too unfriendly, hiding even this from me." Ling Han chuckled. "It's a long story, and cannot be summed up in a few words. In brief, I had not deliberately meant to deceive Brother Yulan." Yulan Fenghua also smiled, his gaze flickering slightly. He was measuring his losses and gains. If he moved and got Ling Han killed, just how much trouble would it cause for himself? He thought for a moment, and an idea suddenly came to him. There was no need for him to personally move. He could borrow the help of those four senior brothers and senior sister. He was sure that AI Kai Feng and the others were already quite displeased with Ling Han by now. Right. This had been stirred up by Lin Xian as well. Could it be that there was internal conflict within the Four Seas Palace? This could be exploited. On the other side, the 5 great monarch tiers moving together finally suppressed Besieged. After all, the present Besieged did not have any intelligence, and knew only to attack, so it was definite that his battle prowess would be greatly reduced. Each of the 5 great monarch tiers placed a restriction on Besieged. In this way, unless Besieged's strength was superior to their combined strength, it would be completely impossible for him to break out of these restrictions. "Every step is thorny," they exclaimed ruefully. They had not even taken that many steps, and already one of their numbers was down. Just how dangerous was this mystery realm? After stowing Besieged away into a spatial god tool, the 7 of them continued their journey. This time, they had learned their lesson, keeping their feet elevated about 1 foot from the ground. In this way, there would be no need to fear that something like that insect sting would stab into the soles of their feet. They were not walking very quickly, and not long after, 9 fallen bodies appeared abruptly ahead of them. "They're all dead. Judging by the extent of decomposition, they've been dead for at least several billion years." That's not right. Hasn't this mystery realm just been discovered? Furthermore, it's a lost land from the ancient age at that. How could there possibly be a corpse that is just several billion years old? They exchanged looks, and thought that there was a strangeness about this that could not be described. Could it be that several billion years ago, someone has already entered this place? That's right. It is not definite that a mystery realm has to be fully open to allow entry. In the first place, it was already here. Someone must have accidentally barged into this space, though not a single person managed to leave alive, and that was why this place has never been discovered all this while. Logically, this could be explained. The 7 people nodded. This should be the most logical explanation. The corpses have not been touched. Judging from the look of things, internal strife should have happened among the 9 of them, and they killed each other. They continued their deductions. It is also possible that they belonged to 2 different sides, and just happened to encounter one another here, which was followed by the outbreak of battle. That's also possible. There was naturally nothing much to see about the corpses. The 7 of them very quickly resumed their advance, but they had just taken a few steps when Lao Liang suddenly exclaimed in shock, and then turned around and backtracked. "What is it?" Everyone hurriedly followed him. Not long later, Lao Liang had already returned to where the 9 corpses were laid out. He began to flip over a body, and he found a jade pendant on that body. He carefully examined it for a while, and an expression of astonishment appeared on his face. "Senior brother Lao, what is it?" Ai Kaifeng asked. At first, Lao Liang did not speak. After a while he replied, "I know this person. His name is Yuexi." He waved that jade pendant. "And I have been the one to gift this to him too." "What?" Everyone was incredibly stunned by these words, and an intense coldness rose up in them. It should be known that Lao Liang's flame of life had only been burning for around 700 to 800 million years, but these corpses were at least several billion years old. In that case, how would Lao Liang have known this Yuexi? Was he seeing things? "Senior brother Lao, are you sure that this person is indeed Yuexi?" Di Tongxin asked. "Perhaps. Yuexi has also come here, and something happened, causing him to leave his jade pendant on this corpse?" "That's right. It's horribly corroded, and there is completely no way to distinguish the facial features." Lao Liang shook his head. The jade pendant has not been dropped on this corpse, but was hidden on this corpse. Hence, this person must definitely be Yuexi. Could it be that it was impossible that you have mistaken the jade pendant? These words were the doubt in everyone's mind, but no one spoke it out loud. Since Lao Liang was already so sure, mentioning such words would be equivalent to slapping him in the face. Ling Han took 2 steps forwards, and carefully examined the 9 corpses. Previously, they had only been rummaging through the spatial god tools of these 9 people. There weren't any treasures inside. However, Ling Han placed his focus on their wounds this time. Insect sting. Ling Han discovered a wound on the sole of the foot of one of them, where a gleaming blue insect sting was sticking out. Everyone muttered, "Ee!" It was an insect sting again. Could it be that this person had lost his senses due to the poison, and then killed all of his 8 companions, and ultimately died from the poison himself? Lao Liang continued, "Over 200 years ago, I even met Yuexi once." His words incited even more shock from the others. Could it be that Yu Kaiqing has also just entered this place, and died not too long ago? The natural environment here is unusual, causing a corpse that has only died several years or even several days ago to decompose so badly? Right at this moment, a corpse suddenly released a weird groan, exactly like how Ziwen had done previously. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.